The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod and I'm so grateful to be here with you this morning and so grateful that the internet is holding up. We just have had internet issues. So thrilled to be here, thrilled to be with you and not be frozen. Hey, I'm starting out by saying good morning to Diana and Mary Kathy on YouTube, which is a great segue for me to remind you that we are live. We are coming to you from my house and other people's houses all day today. Thrilled to be here. But you can be interacting with us just like Diana and Mary Kathy are. So let me tell you a little bit about that because we are live for the next hour. That's right, an hour live here with you. And I'm so excited about it. So we are live right now on YouTube, on Periscope, on Twitter, on Facebook, and on our homepage, autism-live.com. Yes, the website supposedly is fixed. So check us out there. It only takes a small miracle, right? But we are available in all those places live right now. We will also be available recorded on all those places immediately after the show. And then we will also podcast later in the day or tomorrow this episode to iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Ghana, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Deezer, and many more, like too many more now to list. And we are loving your suggestions of places that you would like to hear us that we are not yet. And assume that if you're on your favorite podcast place and we're not there, assume that it's just because we don't know. And please let us know because we would like to be as available to people as we possibly can. One of our benchmarks is that it has to be free to the viewers. We are a free download everywhere. We feel like you have enough things to spend your money on. And when I say you, the people that I'm talking to are the very large autism community, the big, beautiful, bold, diverse autism community. That starts, of course, with individuals who are on the autism spectrum. I always like to say they're the beating heart of our community. Everything that we do starts and ends with them, correct? But we also welcome to our audience and to the discussion everyone who loves those individuals. There's a phrase that's going around right now, allies, right? And I consider us all part of a beautiful community that we get there together. And where is there? It's different for everyone. It is not a one size fits all. What one person needs is not what another person needs, right? I mean, when would it be in life ever that way? But we know that individuals on the autism spectrum deserve respect, jobs, housing, the opportunity to love who they love, to wear the clothes they want to wear, right? All of those things. And those of us who love individuals on the autism spectrum want to help them to get to that. And we know that when we combine all of our voices together, that we can help individuals to have their voices heard. How does that sound? That sounds good to me. So we are, I love, Purple Lover said, can I ask a question here? And Dakota North said, you just did. And both of you were right. Yes, you can ask questions wherever you just asked that question. And that's true, it is a question. But we will take a question of something that you really want to know. Absolutely, right where you just did it, Purple Lover. And it shows up almost in real time now on our new platform, which we're really, really loving. So that's how you do that, to ask a question on whatever platform that you're doing. I will tell you that for YouTube and Facebook, Twitter, and Periscope, because on this new format, we have the feed comes right in. So you ask the question, and I think it's fairly quickly, it shows up here on my screen. It takes a little bit longer on our homepage, autism-live.com, but there is a chat button there. And I really encourage people, if you're watching the show recorded, to leave chats there, because we check that regularly and fold those questions in when we have experts. And someone said, thank you so much for a supportive community. I'm striving to use my voice, and autism-live is helping me to find it. And that just warms my heart to the point that I can't even speak. Not really, because I can always speak. But I'll tell you something, that October's been a little bit of a hiccupy month all over the place, but November is shaping up to be like the best lineup of guests we have ever had on the show. 10 years now. And it's November. I can't even tell you, but already there are 2 guests booked that I've wanted to have on the show forever. You're going to lose your minds. All right. So keep showing up, and we're going to unveil in a couple of days. And also, you want to make sure that you're here with us, not this coming Friday, but the Friday after, because it's our Halloween episode with Nancy Allspaw Jackson and I, and we have decided who we're going to be. And if you've watched our show for Halloween before, we don't do it a little, and COVID's not going to stop us. So you're going to want to check this out, because we have arrived at who we are going to be, and I think it's going to be super fun. Hi, our journey. We're so thrilled to have you here. So thank you so much for being here. All right. I like to remind you at the start of the show that we have many, many experts on the show, and I'm so privileged to be able to bring that to you. I know in the early days, after my son was diagnosed with autism, I was like, where do we go to get information? It just seemed like the wild, wild west. And there was some excuse me, these are new teeth. I'm kidding. But there were some information, I can't even say it still. There was some information on the internet that I wasn't sure, is it good information, is it bad information? And now there's just that much more, right? So I was always wanting to go to a conference, couldn't get to a conference because I couldn't afford it. And who was going to watch my child? And if I could find somebody to watch my child, he wasn't going to make any progress, right? While I was gone. So, there was no going to a conference. And I would try to buy books when I could, but books were expensive, right? But I was so jealous of people who could go to conferences. Now, I'll tell you 2 things. Right now, in this month, TACA is doing their month-long online conference. And it was $50 to register. For those of you who watched the show and got in on the early registration for $25, it's a month of conferences, experts that you can watch online. And I think that that's absolutely wonderful, because you can't get enough of that, right? That interaction with experts and finding out what's going on for what you need to know, which is not one size fits all. But many, many years ago, I got sent to the home of a family, and I met their kid, and it changed everything. And of course, I went to the home of Logan Shepard. We've talked about him before on the show, and we want to give a big shout out to Pete Shepard, his dad, because Pete's the one that changed our world. I came to his house to sell him a closet, because that's what I was doing. I was selling closets. It was the only thing I could do with the time that I had available, because my son had been diagnosed with autism. Had a master's degree in theater and had been a theater professor, and I'm selling closets. Look, it was an honest living. And I showed up at Pete Shepard's door, and he is one of those people who is just always finding the joy. And I don't know about you guys, but when I was in a really bad mood on the day that I came to his house, and feeling very sorry for myself and not knowing what the future was for me or my son. And Pete was just one of those really happy people, and I kind of wanted to choke him. And but he kept asking me questions, not about closets, can I just say? He was asking me questions like, was I a parent? And how old was my kid? And was my kid talking? Like, who asks these questions? Well, eventually I found out that he had a kid on the spectrum too. And Pete is the first person who introduced me to CARD. Changed my life. Changed my son's life, changed my family's life, changed our trajectory. And it's the whole reason why I'm here with you today, is because of Pete Shepard. But at one point, after he was telling me about CARD, I said, my husband and I are like, there should be a magazine or something about autism. And I remember Pete was like, well, good luck with that. You have a lot to do to help your kid first. And then, check back with us about that, right? But lady, you got a lot to take care of in your own house before you go start a magazine. But really, that was the germ of the thought that eventually became a radio show, and then now became Autism Live. So we're thanking Pete Shepard. We would not be here. That the long and winding road that got us here started in Pete Shepard's living room because he is an uber happy, joyful person. So blessings upon Pete and his birthday. But I go to that because my whole thing was I want to go someplace to have experts. So I want to remind you, we bring you as many experts as we can, as often as we can, but I'm not one of them. I've already identified myself as the mother of an individual who was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2.5. And, I'm not even an expert in him. So I have an opinion. Yes, I have an opinion. And I like to say an informed opinion after interviewing people for over 12 years now about autism, but not an expert. So don't confuse me there, right? I'm just cycling through. We have had a couple of questions that I want to get to really quickly because we have amazing guests this morning. Where's my chat here? Okay. So my son is 30 months old. I'm doing ABA therapy myself. He's combining 2 words to request his needs. Now I'm working to make him express his interests and achievements. Any tips on that? I'm going to tell you 2 things that are available to you that we talk about this on the show all the time. One of them is called ibehavioraltraining.com. And it's a wonderful place where you can get very low cost videos about how to teach an individual on the autism spectrum. And really, the truth is, it's about how to teach anybody anything. It just happens to also be effective for people on the spectrum. And they offer free trainings every week. They have trainings in 3 different categories. They have them for people who are already in the field and working to get their CEU, their continuing education units, or to learn about a subject that they don't already know about, or to become a registered behavior technician. They have videos about all of those things that you do. It's self-paced, gives you quizzes, and you can do them, stop, pause, whatever, perfect, right? They also have a category that's just for teachers. How do you make the classroom work when you're dealing with some of the challenges that come with autism? It's great. I'm a former teacher. These are great videos. And then there's a third category that are just for caregivers, that are the very real realities of being at home. And a lot of it is, I want to say this, has less jargon. So you can do the parent ones to start. And then if you wanted to go on to do a registered behavior technician one, you could really do any of them. They're very low cost, and they offer some of them free every month. So I don't know, Traven, if you have the phone number that is for IBT so that they can call. And all you have to do is say you watch Autism Live and say, what can you give me? I'm friends with Shannon. I always say, tell them you want the Friends and Family program. But there's the phone number right there, 877-975-4559. Now, they also have another product that's called Skills, and it is the curriculum. It is the curriculum that they use at CARD. It's the curriculum that helped my son. It's amazing. You don't have to be a CARD client to use the curriculum. It is a subscription base. If you tell them that you saw it here, they'll give you a 10% discount. But it has all of the things that you're asking about. Let me go back to, because you're wanting for him to express, so it's desires that you're working on for him to express his interest. And so there's a whole set of lessons, I believe it's in the cognition curriculum, that's about desires. And he'll learn about his desires, what he likes, and he'll also learn to think about that you like things different than your friend Letitia, right? So that he'll start to notice that. And that's the beginning of perspective taking, which is pretty awesome, right? I also want to recommend Temple Grandin's book, Calling All Minds, because Temple says that, your child is not going to find what jazzes them unless you expose them to a lot of different things. And so she has a book called Calling All Minds. In fact, we're recommending it on our, the toy guide that's coming out in a couple of weeks as a gift to give to caregivers, because it has little things that you can do with your kiddo to sort of see what sparks their interest, from, creating a paper airplane through so many other different things. And excuse me, the truth is that, like anything else, we don't know until we expose them to it. So, and that's hard during COVID. It's super duper hard. But the truth is that you can find a lot of virtual things that you can take your child to virtual museums right now, virtual zoos. And there's a lot of art programs that are on there. I encourage people, just like flood your child with culture to see, you'll see very quickly what they gravitate towards. And then you just expand on that. So we've had Christina Adams on the show before, and her son was always interested in airplanes. And so she didn't leave it there. She, took him to an airport and hired a pilot, to just sit in his little Cessna plane and show the controls to her child to see, are you that level of interested, or are you just like the outside? Like what do you like, right? And then you just start feeding it a little more and a little more. And her son didn't end up being a pilot, but it fed other things, and then she could go, oh, it's this part of the plane that he likes, and it's this part of this, which is pretty cool, right? But I love that you are taking this on in COVID at 30 months, girl, you're making it happen. That's really wonderful. Okay. How am I, Helen? I am good. Happy birthday, Helen. I happened to notice this morning that it was your birthday, so happy birthday to you. When is a parent able to request from a school district for their child to go to a private school for kids with autism so that they're able to learn in the way that their brain was designed? Well, we've got Bonnie Yates coming up, so we'll ask her that. Somebody said, trying not to feel sorry for myself. Sometimes I feel like I'm on a slippery slope, learning to live with autism, or shall I say with others that do not understand me and my challenged areas. And you know what? That's a process. And I just want to say to you that sometimes the world will tell you who you should be and how you should be. And I think it's really important every once in a while, just stand with your 2 feet on the ground and tell yourself that you are perfect just like you are, and that everyone does not have to be the same. I always use the example of Walt Disney. Walt Disney was not like everybody else. His brain did not work like everybody else, and he had some things going on in his brain. People thought he was crazy. Well, you know what? If he's crazy, let's all be crazy, right? Because sometimes crazy is crazy good. So you're different. Hallelujah. I'm so glad that you're here with us. And I know that it's hard, but I do know for all of us that self-love has to start inside us, right? And that we can't go looking for it from other people. Sometimes it will show up from other people, but you got to have it inside. And I can tell you that you're perfect. You're absolutely perfect. We're all learning. We're all growing. We can get better at the things that we're not good at, but you're already perfect. And that's the truth. Okay, we have got to get to our jargon because Bonnie is probably already here. So really quickly, let's get to the jargon of the day, shall we? Okay. This is what every day we try to take on one word, one phrase, one acronym, and we try to figure out what in the hey nani nani are those experts talking about. So I don't know if I'm sticking, Traven, or what's happening, but have you got jargon? And maybe we just need to go on with Bonnie. I don't know. The jargon we may have to, let's go straight to Bonnie. We'll do jargon later. That's what Traven was saying to me. Okay, so we have Bonnie Yates with us. She is a special education attorney with a law firm of Tollner Law Offices. And we just adore the ground that she walks on. She's an amazing person, an amazing woman, amazing attorney. I know she's like, stop already. But it's all true. An amazing mom. So Bonnie, welcome back to Autism Live.
Oops, I guess that's my cue to talk. Sorry about that.
Well, I just go on and on and on.
I was actually thinking about was, I think it's harder to be a mom than any of those other jobs I've had, and I know dads and moms now are really learning, exactly how strong they are because they're doing things that they thought if you told anybody we'd be doing these things, they'd be like, what? So we had a bunch of questions that came in and
a new one today.
Them. And then I've got backup information, including sexuality, predetermination, and prior written notice.
Ooh,
We can do a lot of
the hip
stuff. And I'm supposed to have
work.
said that I work for Tollner Law Offices. We're an 8-attorney firm in San Jose. You can find us on the web. If you want a free consultation and you're in California, Arizona, or Nevada, we can do that for you. If you're in any of the other 50 states, I recommend that you have a specific conversation with a specific attorney about your specific problem. What we're doing here is trying to educate you on your legal rights under the IDEA, but it's not always a substitute for actually a really focused conversation in which we would actually look at documents also. You know, the documents are a big deal. So just know that when we're answering questions, oftentimes it's with abbreviated facts, not knowing what state you're in, not knowing what age your child is. So I guess to that end, when you do write questions in and it's relevant, if you can tell us those things, it might help us give you a little better answer. So
All
now
right.
Ben's going to read the questions.
Okay. And we had one that just came in that I want to try to get to as well. That
Well, you're the boss. You
has
can
your
read
name
in any
written all
order
over
you
it.
want.
Okay, so the first one, thank you for all you do. This is such a, and this, they said specifically, this is for Bonnie, and they said, thank you for all you do. This is such a great resource. I have a question about OT. Normally, my son has a pullout for OT. He goes into a room full of equipment and he has the opportunity to do big muscle things. This is for his sensory regulation. For 2 years, they have been telling me he has to have this pullout and it has to be to work the big muscles. I wanted a push in. Nope, they won't, that won't get it done. He won't be able to focus. Now we are doing school at home, and suddenly they want to tell me he doesn't need it. Based on what? COVID, I guess. The OT person comes on the screen and she has him do handwriting. And really, it's me doing it with him. I said, what happened to all the big movements? And they don't have an answer.
Well, you know, there's been a lot of discussion about whether you could stay put prior services during COVID, and the cases have been going in not a consistent direction. Some yes, some no. Did it specify in your IEP anywhere? I wonder that this was like, you know, for gross motor, it was supposed to be clinically based. It was supposed to be push. You know, it's not supposed to be push in. It was supposed to be for large muscle groups. It would be interesting to know if any of that would work. If any of that was in your IEP, so it's really clear what the service is. You might be able to do a motion for stay put and get them to implement the IEP as it's supposed to be implemented. I'm wondering if they're going to say there's no way they can do the clinical occupational therapy, because I think this person said she's in California. If that's the case, the Norris case, which I circulated a few weeks ago, said if it's necessary to provide FAPE and the district can't do it with its own staff, that's what non-public agencies are for. So they could certainly pay for clinical occupational therapy from a non-public provider if they don't have the ability to do it, you know, in-house on their own. It probably behooves you to write them a letter and, you know, tell them that you were consulting with an attorney and the attorney didn't seem to have the same view as the school district did about why the change in the OT service delivery was permissible, even though that's not what he was getting before, and tell them that you would like to have an IEP meeting with them and you hope you can work it out. Now, if you can't work it out, you've got more than one option, and maybe we could talk about that in a separate show, but, you know, specifically, your options would be file for due process and move for stay put, or you could do a complaint to the California Department of Education saying that they aren't implementing your child's IEP properly, and CDE will get involved, and if they find things are wrong, they will order corrective action. And I do want to say that I feel like one of the bright spots in the last few months is that CDE has been staying on top of districts. I've involved them over issues of IEEs, of district refusing to hold an IEP, even though the assessments had been conducted. That was back in April. And so districts don't like compliance complaints. They don't like the state coming down and sort of poking around in their business. So that might be the most cost-effective way for you to do it. You could also do what's called a uniform complaint, which just goes to the superintendent of your school. I just think those tend to be unproductive. Usually, a lot of the time, it just ends up being a rubber stamp of what was done below. But those are some options for you. And I don't think, as Shannon said, there hasn't been any showing that that there was a reason, a clinical reason why the services changed. We understand that the services have changed because the district doesn't know how to deliver them anymore, but that's not adequate.
Yeah, I guess I'm with you on what is in the IEP, because even for OT, they have goals that your child has, and if there are goals in there about those big muscle things, then that's, like you said, Bonnie. I mean, that's where you start and stop. I'm just wondering. So you have an
Yeah,
IEP.
that's a very good point, and one that I didn't think of, which is why it's nice to have you as my backup.
You taught me well. I learn at the feet of the master. But here's my question for you, though, that I don't know that I know the answer to. So you have your IEP and you have your goals, and if they haven't X those goals out at the end of the year, you start the year with those goals until you do a new IEP.
Well,
Right?
then they haven't offered FAPE in that area. If you don't meet the goals, then they haven't offered FAPE.
So there we are, because it seems like that's the easiest path to pull out your IEP and go, why? Oh, in OT we have these 3 goals, and I haven't seen the person work on that. And maybe they should be videotaping it to say, it's been 3 weeks and never once has she worked on this big muscle group. I don't know. You're the lawyer. Tell me.
Well, we just don't know what the IEP says, what the goals say, what the baselines were, whether the child is regressed during COVID and comp ed is owed, but we sort of presume that it is. So,
but I guess my question is, they can't just decide without an IEP to implement new goals or different goals that were in the IEP just because summer happened, correct?
Well, the distance learning plan is the way they implement the IEP during school closure. But that to me doesn't mean different goals or a different service. Certainly, if it were to have been a different service, like, oh, okay, the best we can do now is fine motor. If you change that without an IEP, it's a change of placement without parental notice or participation. So I don't think they're right about it. My feeling about it is just, hey, they're trying to see whether it'll fly or not.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that. So pull out your IEP, take a look, and then if you want to, write us back. Next question. I asked my school for a distance learning plan, like you suggested. They said the plan is for everyone to have distance learning. I said I need something for the IEP, and they said they're still doing the IEP. They acted like I'm crazy. What are the words that I need to say? And I've heard this from more than one parent, Bonnie, that the school is like, the distance learning plan is we're going distance learning. They don't know what it means. What
I would have to ask her first is, what are they doing now, and how does it compare to what your student had prior to school closure? Are they implementing the IEP to the best of their ability? The law in California says they have to have an emergency plan, and they do need to reduce it to writing. So again, I feel like districts, okay, first of all, I just want to say to everybody, the districts are really busy. Like, the attorneys are being really slow to get back to us, and they're even coming way close to blowing timelines on 30-day IEP requests. So if you're experiencing that, it's not in your imagination. And so I think their problem is they're probably having to do some kind of IEP for every kid, where before they were only doing them manually. So they're definitely backed up. And I think you need to have a discussion with them and tell them that you understand that the distance learning plan is the way they're implementing FAPE, but you have concerns about the way they're implementing it, and you have some other ideas and suggestions, and you want to have a meeting. I mean, if at the bare minimum, they need to send you the distance learning plan.
Oh, they're acting like they don't even. A lot of these schools, Bonnie, are acting like they don't even know what that is.
Yeah, well, guess what? That's not true. They do know.
Okay.
SB 820 specifically references that anytime there's a closure of school for more than 10 days, at the next IEP, the district has to develop an emergency plan. So that's California laws, SB 820. You
Okay.
know, I mean, sometimes you just hear stuff and you sort of scratch your head. I had a question this morning from an advocate who told her that prior written notice wasn't a part of the law anymore. I was just like, well, here's the law. I don't, you know, I don't see any changes. I mean, you have to consider the source. And I guess, you know, you really have to consider the source. Like, you know, I learned a long time ago in law school, after you would leave and you would, from an exam, you'd hear everybody talking about what they wrote on the exam. And then you'd get all intimidated and freaked out. And then you'd say to yourself, I can't listen to these people. So, you know, if people are telling you stuff and it doesn't seem right to you, that's probably because it doesn't pass the smell test.
There we go. Okay. I feel so bad for this parent. They say, I am just done with this school nonsense. I want to stop. Can we just throw this year in the rubbish? We were distance learning and I tried it for 4 weeks. Then I asked for an IEP to say it's not working. They told me at the meeting we were going back to in person, so all would be better. We started in person, went 4 days, and one of the kids tested positive. Now we are back to being at home for 2 weeks. He is in second grade, a special ed class, has autism plus. If we just stop and say we will try again next fall, do we lose anything? We'll lose the year, but will we lose the IEP and have to start all over? I don't think there's any benefit for him to be at the school with masks and risking of being infected, and distance isn't working at all.
Well, I guess what I would say to her is, what is your plan C? Is your plan C that you're going to homeschool him? Is your plan C that you're going to find a private school that you think is safe? If you just opt out for a year, then they don't have any obligation to provide you with compensatory education, which they owe you from March to, it sounds like you did, you know, 4 weeks in the fall, and it wasn't very good. And I hope you took really good documentation. So what you need to do is have an IEP with them and tell them that they're, you know, the options that you've been offered are so bad that you're considering, you know, having to resort to self-help measures, but tell them you don't want to do that, but this is what it's going to take if they're going to fix things for you. Now, there's a lot of school district attorneys running around telling people, if the parent, you know, removes a child from the local public school and places a child in a private program, they're disenrolled from the district. That is not true. If you are removing your child from public school because the district isn't offering you a free, appropriate public education, and you give 10 business days notice and your reasons for the removal, you still have claims against the district. So if your position is, the best I can do is homeschool my student for this school year, you need to give them notice in a way that's going to protect your right to bring claims later. Now, we've talked about this on the show before, but it's worth bringing up again. In California, all you have to do to form a homeschool is to go online to the California Department of Education, fill in a 2-page homeschool affidavit, which is nothing. And once you do that, your home becomes a private school with one student, your student. So that's the way you protect your rights. I think that, you know, the big problem for folks is like, what if there are no good options at all?
Well, and I'll be honest with you, Bonnie, I'm hearing from a lot of parents who have kids that are greatly affected, and, you know, that things are really hard in a regular situation, but
Yes,
with
they
COVID,
are.
and they're saying to me, why can't I just not do any, like, I want my child to be educated, but I send my child mostly to school for them to have a break, for them to socialize, for me to have a break. And since none of that is happening, can't I just, and parents who have said to me, listen, my kid is not the kid who's ever going to go to college. My kid, you know, they'll say to me, I'm not giving up, but I want to be realistic. And this is just torture. Could we just take a year off?
Well, yeah, I
don't know the
I
answer.
just told you how to take a year off. I mean, I just told you you could do homeschooling for a year and not.
But what if they don't want to do homeschooling? Can they
Well, what are they going to do?
play?
That is homeschooling. There's no specific curriculum they have to follow. That's the whole thing about California is if you set up a homeschool in your home, nobody can come in and tell you you're doing it wrong. Now, if you opt out of distance learning and you don't set up the homeschool or communicate to the district what you're doing, they can still report you for truancy for
Okay.
not
All right.
doing the
That's
distance
the answer
learning.
then.
I mean, the other thing we've been doing is we've been taking the distance learning plans and actually taking data on them. We did an IEP, which turned out quite successfully after we showed all the problems with the distance learning plan and excuse me, indicated periods of the day that we wanted to opt out from. Sorry, the district agreed to move the ABA provider from Zoom to home. So that, you know, that there might be ways to reconfigure the schedule that make it more useful to the parent.
Okay. Well, all of this sort of feeds into the next question that I have. How does the funding for in-home school programs work? I just keep thinking they already have this figured out. The ones that you subscribe to, I think is what they're talking about, that they've already have this figured out. I would switch to a homeschool program if I knew we wouldn't have to pay for it.
Okay, well, the private homeschools like Laurel Springs, you do have to pay for. The advantage to those is that you don't change districts. If you write the district a letter and you say you're not offering me a FAPE, I have no choice, but I got to set up a homeschool in my home, and I'm going to use the Laurel Springs curriculum, you still have claims against the district for the time period when your kid's going to be in homeschool. If instead you put your child in any one of a number of these virtual charter schools, I guess we should call them, that have a curriculum, you change your district. Now, CDE also there's a California state curriculum. I don't know what else they offer. Like when you join a virtual charter school, they usually give you a little more than just the curriculum. You know, there's some services too, but you can certainly do that. The question is, do you want to disenroll your child from the district, which is what happens if you put them in a virtual charter school? Then the charter school becomes responsible for implementing the IEP. Or do you want to, not do that so that you can stay enrolled in your own district and bring claims against them? It's sort of six of one, half a dozen of another. But yes, you can certainly do an online program. The thing I was hearing from a client in August was that CDE for the first time put caps on some of these virtual charter schools, and they were filling up. And so I don't know how easy it's going to even be to find a charter school that can offer a spot at this point, but I haven't looked.
Okay. But I think the main thing is that it sounds like if you pull your child out, you're going to have to pay for the homeschool program. You can always go back and see if you can get the money from the school, but there's no guarantee. Is that what you're saying?
If you are going to do that, I mean, legally, that's true. I mean, if you can't find a free curriculum that you can use, you need to give the district 10 business days notice and tell them why. And then, yes, you can certainly, when school reopens, there's going to be a reckoning in terms of, what kids are owed for comp ed. And at that point, you would certainly be able to raise the issue, or even sooner, of why you need this curriculum.
Okay. We're saying hi to Miss Brenda Lee. We're actually saying hi to a bunch of people. I want to go to a question that Missy asked. She's in Glendale, and she says, when is a parent able to request from a school district for their child to go to a private school for kids with autism so that they're able to learn in the way that their brain was designed?
Well, the answer is when the district can't offer them FAPE within the district. I mean, we do private school cases all the time. You've got to get an outside evaluation that looks at the current setting and then looks at the possibilities and makes a recommendation. You need to take that back to the district at an IEP meeting and say, I've just had this qualified outside evaluator look at my child's needs via assessment and also via observation, and she doesn't think the present placement is working. She thinks I need a non-public school. They don't usually like to say the name of it. It makes it hard if it turns out that school isn't available. So they usually say things like, well, it needs to be a special education school with a class size no larger than 13 and teachers trained in multi-sensory reading methods and, OT on staff. And I mean, they can list out all the specifics. When the district is asked that at the IEP meeting and they say no, that's when you have to file for due process. And most people that get private schools or non-public schools are having to go to due process. Not everybody, but a lot of people wouldn't have the services they have if they had sort of quit at the IEP level.
I want to do a shout out because I don't know if she's still with us, but Melissa Schomburg Lander was with us for a few minutes.
Oh, cool.
And she was somebody that you did a shout out for last week and talked about how amazing she is and her service standout advocates, how amazing they are. I think we're both big fans of hers. Just giving a shout out to her.
Yep.
I also want to say somebody wrote in and said, I'm doing play-based therapy. My little girl is 30 months old. She has language, some sort of social skills, but she engages in self-play most of the time. Any tips on improving social behavior? And then we've had several questions about people talking about play therapy. And I don't know where you are on this, Bonnie. I love toys and I love using toys as part of therapy. It's the reason why we have our toy guide that we're going to start revealing next month. And I think that play is a really important way for our kiddos to have a safe place in which to learn important lessons, including social lessons. I do want to caution everybody, though, that at 2.5, that's if your child has an autism spectrum diagnosis, that is a time when you are it's most advantageous for you to start an ABA program. And part of ABA utilizes play. So I just want to put that out there, that there are 0 studies that show that a child has made enough progress from play therapy to lose their diagnosis. There's 0 studies that show that, but there are over 1,000 studies that show that with ABA started at that age, it's entirely possible that roughly 50% of the kids who start ABA at the age of that 30 months will lose their diagnosis if they get good quality ABA therapy and they get the right amount of it. We're not talking about 10 hours a week. We're not talking about 20 hours a week. We're talking about 40 hours a week. So just want to put that out there. Bonnie, do you have anything that you want to say about that? Because I know you have feelings about ABA.
Well, you and I both had a very excellent result with ABA. So, if I had to do it all over again, there might be some things I would tweak, but I don't really have the expertise to comment about play therapy and say more than you said already. I'm playing all the time with a 15-month-old little boy, and I teach him everything via play, but he's not having any significant interfering, behaviors. So,
Yeah. Well, even then at 2.5, our kids are still supposed to be playing side by side. They're not supposed to be interacting, although there are a bunch of things that we can do in play to build social skills. And I would tell you, we talked about skills earlier. I would tell you to look at the joint attention lessons, that if you can at that age be getting a child to look at something, so you look at something and you go, oh, look, it's Mickey Mouse, and they look at Mickey Mouse, and then you both turn back and look at each other and then look back at Mickey Mouse. That's the ground floor of every social skill that happens later on. It's called joint attention, and there are lessons to teach that through play. But at 2.5, you should not be expecting them to do a great deal more than that. But take a look at skills. It age norms all of the different things. All right, Bonnie, we literally only, because I have to still do jargon of the day, so we probably have like 2 more minutes. Is there something that you would like to do with 2 more minutes?
Yeah, I think we could do. Well, I think we could at least start talking about sexuality.
Let's do it.
Okay, so sexuality is not a topic that is particularly favored by parents of young children. And so for parents with disabilities, this becomes an even more perplexing topic. I can just tell you, without getting into any gory details, disability or not, sexuality is going to become an issue as your child becomes 10, 11, 12. So I think the best way to handle it is to be matter of fact. Now, Regional Center historically has provided some courses on sexuality, but the resource that I was looking at over the weekend talks about it more in terms of being a responsibility of the school district to address in kind of community-based education. So maybe if I read really fast, I
Okay.
can just read this one page, and then the other stuff that we were going to do today, we can do next week.
Okay.
Okay. Comprehensive sexuality education can be integral to the development of students with disabilities, particularly those that are socially isolated during the pandemic. Sexuality education concepts include personal and interpersonal skills such as valuing others, making decisions, communicating, and self-advocacy, said Rachel Schwartz, an education consultant and behaviorist with the Watson Institute in Pittsburgh. But often these skills in the context of sexuality are overlooked. The former special education teacher said that in some cases, educators are not providing information to students at all. In other cases, educators are providing indirect, incomplete, or infrequent information. And that goes back to, we're all animals. This is a biological process, and we have to just be matter of fact about it, in my opinion. Sexuality education may be ineffective when language is not concrete or it is incomplete, said Schwartz, adding that educators tend not to say things as they are. For example, educators may talk about hygiene or touch, but steer away from more uncomfortable conversation. The best thing we can do as special educators is to empower language, she said. Sexuality education is not just about sexual intercourse. Sexuality relates to to self-image. Schwartz said that when it comes to sexuality, students with disabilities develop the same as their peers without exceptionality. They still want to have personal connections with other people. Schwartz said that by not integrating sexuality into differentiated instruction, we're really denying students the ability to be included in a community and interacting. By being more deliberate, educators can prevent adults coming into this world without necessary knowledge and being susceptible to sexual assault and sexual abuse, she said. So should I stop there and I can do the rest next week?
Yeah. We had one more question. Thank you, Bonnie. We had one more question come in. Do you know the name of a lawyer in Queens, New York, who represents teenagers for Social Security benefits, or a group I can reach out to?
Yeah, Gary Meyerson, Mayerson. He's in New York City. Call him and get a reference. He should know somebody.
Okay.
Mayerson, or Barbara Ebenstein, who I've mentioned before on the show. Ebenstein. They ought to know.
And if you are in California, Nevada, or Arizona, we want to encourage you to reach out to Bonnie's law firm, Tollner Law Offices. And they said, thank you for that, Bonnie. And talk to them. If you want to get a free consultation, you can. You do have to fill out some paperwork to be able to do that.
It's a very short form. But can I just jump in and say somebody else is posing a really good question that we don't have time to answer on the air now, but we could talk about next week. When is a good time to tell the child they have autism?
Yeah.
So we can come back to that.
Yeah, that's a really important question. But Bonnie, we thank you so much. Oh, the other thing I was going to say is that you also recommend that if somebody is outside of California, Nevada, or Arizona, to reach out to COPA. Both of us have this tickle.
Yeah, exactly. COPA is a really good place to start. I think it's a really good organization, and they do have an attorney directory for all the 50 states. So thank you for mentioning that, Shannon.
COPAA.net. I believe .com works as well. But Bonnie, we it might be.
I don't know, but I'm just kidding. You know what? I think it's copa.net.
Okay. But it might, but see what works. Okay. Bonnie, thank you so much. We're going to stick around to do jargon of the day, but we really appreciate you being with us and answering these questions.
Okay, well, we'll pick it up next week.
We will. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Okay, I just didn't want to get behind on our jargon. We have a quota. We have to do a certain number. So let's go ahead with jargon of the day there, Traven. We're doing it at a weird time, but This is when we take on one word, one phrase, one acronym. We try to figure out what in the hey nani, not look at what our jargon of the day is today. What in the hey nani nani are those experts talking about, and what does it have to do with us? So we were just talking about IEPs. And I always encourage you, if we're using letters on the show and you're like, I don't know what they're talking about, please remember we were that way on a day. I remember somebody saying the word IEP. I was a teacher and I didn't know what it was, right? So let's go ahead and look at our actual definition of what an IEP is, and then we'll give you a working definition, something that you don't have to have a degree in education or be an attorney to know. So Traven, can we have that screen back? There we are, IEP. So what's our actual definition of an IEP? IEP stands for Individualized Education Program, a federally mandated legal document that details education goals for a specific child within the special education scope. You have to be, you have to have a qualifying reason to have an IEP, but autism, if you have an autism diagnosis, your child is eligible for an IEP. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but this is a little bit overwhelming, right? Because you go, I don't know. So let's go on to our working definition of what an IEP is. This is a written plan to educate a child with special needs that must be followed. It's a legal document, and what is on there, you have a legal right to. So a lot of times when you guys write in and ask Bonnie a question, we'll say, what's on the IEP? Because everybody's goals are different, and there are different parts of the IEP that there's a place where it specifies services. So that's where on the service page is where you'll see if your child has an aid, you'll see if your child has OT or APE, alphabet land, right? So OT is occupational therapy, whether they have speech, whether AP is adaptive physical education. There might be other services on there that your child gets, and they'll detail how many minutes they get across a month or a semester or a year. They're always pulling out their calculators, figuring out how many, if it's, once half an hour a week, how many minutes is that across a year, right? So that's the services page, but then there are goals, and the goals outline everything that they are responsible for teaching your child that school year. So, it's really like it's like a crystal ball. You want to look into the future and see, okay, at the end of this school year, he will be able to identify all of the letters in the alphabet. Right. And then they set benchmarks for, we don't just plan to get there. Every quarter we have to report, how are we doing on this, right? There are accommodations. There's an accommodation page that talks about things that have to be a little bit different for your child as opposed to another child. Like maybe on the accommodations page, it has that your child has preferential seating in the classroom so that they're sitting in the front or the back or whatever works for them, right? I remember at one point we had to get that for my son because things were going great in school and then they weren't. And we had eyes go in and observe and go, he's sitting directly behind a girl with a swishy blonde ponytail, and all he's watching is the ponytail. We switched their desks, and now he was sitting in front of her. We go back to being a stellar scholar, right? So sometimes our kids need preferential seating. Accommodations could be that they get more time on assignments, that they get reduced homework. I mean, the list is endless for accommodations. But the other thing, that there's a place on the first page of your IEP that it says behavior intervention plan attached. And if it is checked, then the behavior intervention plan has to be attached, and then the behavior intervention plan becomes legal too, which means if they don't follow the behavior intervention plan, they're in trouble. So if the behavior intervention plan says that if your child is spitting, it says first we do this, then we do this, and then this happens, right? And so if it doesn't, and your teacher decides to humiliate your child and make them stand on a chair with their face in the corner, and that's not what it says on the BIP, because it would never say that on the BIP, the behavior intervention plan, then that's legally actionable. So often as we watch the news and we see these ridiculous things that teachers do with kids that are on the autism spectrum, and I'm a former teacher, it just makes me nuts. But it also makes me go, is there a BIP, and was it checked off attached to the IEP? Because if there is, people are in a whole world of hurt and trouble, right? Because that's when legally you have big standing. Because if they're not following the letter of the law on the IEP, then they are what we call out of compliance. And when you say to a school district, excuse me, you're out of compliance, a shiver runs down their spine, because out of compliance means they are going to end up writing a check, and they don't like to write checks, right? So we utilize this document to make sure that our child is getting their free, appropriate public education. That's why the IEP is so important. You go to a meeting, please make sure you go to the meeting, please make sure you tape record it, and don't sign it until you've had an opportunity to go home, mull it over, proofread it. I've had IEPs where they shoved something into it that we did not discuss in the meeting that I caught on the second and third read. If you have the opportunity to have a friend or a lawyer look it over and make sure that it's all on the up and up, and then you sign, right? Amanda says, I love accommodations. You can get them for standardized testing as well. It was very helpful for my son. Oh, yes. The accommodations page sometimes makes all the difference in the world. You know what my favorite accommodation was? Is that that my child, now he's at a school where they do this anyway, but I don't, I know why schools don't do this, because they can't always afford to, but having one set of books for the school and one set of books for home. So you never are sitting there doing homework and going, oop, we don't have the book. And your child doesn't end up with scoliosis from carrying every book home every single time. I can't even tell you what a difference that made when we had that accommodation put in. Having someone to work on executive functions things with your child, especially when they get up into those junior high years, you can ask for executive function assistance, either from an aide or from someone else. And what it does is helps them to learn how to use a planner, and checks in with them about, okay, you were assigned this and it's due in 14 days. So what do you need to be doing today, and carrying them all the way through? Because a lot of times our kiddos can do the work, they just don't know how to hand it in and take it to completion. And having an executive functions coach sometimes can be like, woo, watch that kid become stellar A student. Okay, so that's our jargon of the day. We got to quickly move on to our question of the day for you. Our question today is, how is distance learning going for you? How's that? And I laugh because it's that or cry, right? I don't know anybody who's like, ooh, my distance learning plan is so good. It's so much better than it was before. I have heard people say my child is learning so much more than they were in school. I have heard that, but it's not because of the distance learning plan. So how is it going for you, and what do you need? Because we're going to be talking about this more and more, because it's the hot topic right now, right? So moving on, we always have a topic of the week, and how do we put all of these things together? What is our topic this week for you? It's learning to learn, and being able to help our kids to learn and grow. It's really important to educate our kids, but if we lose out on that part of education where we're teaching them how to learn, we're missing the boat. So I love, and this is one of the reasons why I love good quality ABA, is because the whole purpose of ABA is to teach you how to learn and how to generalize things, so that, my son asked me a question the other day. He's in honors physics, and it's just a headache. And he said to me, he was working really hard on this midterm test, and it's just really exhausting. I don't even understand. I look at the questions and I'm like, is that even English? I don't know. Right. And he said to me, is this even going to matter for me? Is this stuff I'm going to learn later on? And I said to him, there's a lot of stuff that I learned in school that I do use. I use every single day, and it's not the stuff I thought I was going to learn. But there's a lot of stuff that I don't use the cold, hard facts of what I learned, but what I learn is the experience of it. So you may never use this physics stuff again in your life, but learning how to get through a task that is monumental, that seems pointless, and take it through fruition and feel good about yourself, that you're going to remember the rest of your life. And I think that this is true for all of our kids. And when I think about the fact that when my son was starting kindergarten, and the thing that I was worried about was, will he ever understand that today is a Monday and what things happen on Monday? Will my son ever know that? And I would cry because it didn't feel like to me that he would ever, he would get up and I would say, it's Monday, and Monday means we go back to school. And it would just, and I thought the day isn't going to come that when he goes, oh, today is Monday, or, we're 2 weeks away from election day, like he won't be able to put that into context and understand the magnitude of all these different little aspects, that he'll never be able to do that. And I just want to share with all of you that, my gosh, no, we got there, and now we're working on honors physics, so I just want to say, learning to learn. If we can't get to the point where we can actually be educating into facts during distance learning, I would tell you, spend less time worrying about that. Ask yourself, is my child learning how to learn in different environments? And if you're doing that, this year is going to end up okay. It will. Maybe we'll have to go back and teach some of the fact things, but really the most important thing is, are they learning how to learn? And this distance learning thing is a different modality, and it's hard, and every kid comes in at a different level and with different interests, but it can be done. We've had people on the show like those air tutor people. I'm trying to think, we've had other people on. I got to get Sarah Niehoff back on, but there are people who are very good at helping our kids. I'm not talking about other people's kids, our kids, to be able to do it in this modality. And I don't think that that's unimportant. We got to meet them where they are, but having them be able to learn in this modality will help them the rest of their lives. It will. So in any case, somebody says, not going. I pulled him out to homeschool and I'm loving it. Man, you're an inspiration to all of us, right? We're going to have you tell us some of your tips and tricks. People say it's hard. The homeschooling is hard. Yes, it is hard. All I can tell you is we got to keep on swimming. Somebody said my son with autism passed his driving test. Woo! That's awesome. That's absolutely incredible. Okay, you guys, we are well past the time when we need to, actually, we're not that past. My clock is off. So there we go. But we are over time. So I just want to thank everybody for being here. I want to remind you that tomorrow we are doing a best of Temple Grandin. And so there's some new stuff on there that I don't think we've aired before. And I think you guys are going to really enjoy it. We're back here on Wednesday with Evelyn Kung. She's going to be here with us to answer your questions. You can be sending those in to us, including on our homepage, autism-live.com right now. And on Thursday, we are going to be doing the toolkit box for how to survive this fall 2020. Including distance learning tips, including holiday tips. We've got some great expert advice lined up for you. And on Friday, we're back with Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. And Vince Redmond, licensed marriage and family therapist, is going to be here with us. And we're going to be talking about stress for us, stress for our kids. So, and how to cope with all that's going on. I saw a really wonderful cartoon today where it said, just like, general stress of life, right? And it was a ball. And then somebody hands them another ball and goes, oh, let's deal with pandemic and COVID stress. Oh, okay. Let's deal with all the financial things that are going on in 2020. Let's deal with election stress. Let's deal with, and one by one, they just kept handing him balls. And he has this look on his face like, and it said 2020. And I thought, yeah, that would be all of us, right? And then for all of you, let's add autism and the world not understanding autism, and sometimes us not understanding autism, right? Let's add that ball in. Yeah. So we're learning how to juggle. All right, you guys, I got to shut up and go, but I so adore you. And I am so privileged to be here with all of you. I'm just reading some of the notes that you guys are writing, and I just adore you. Okay, privileged to be here with you. We're going to be back tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod, and we're coming to you live from many different places around mostly Southern California this morning. So thrilled to be here with you on this Wednesday morning. You know, if you watch the show on a regular basis, that whenever possible, we have Dr. Doreen Grampiche here with us live on Wednesday mornings. And that when we don't have an opportunity to have her, whenever possible, we have Evelyn Kung join us. Well, this is an Evelyn Kung morning, and we're so excited to welcome her back to the program. It's been like a month, Evelyn, and thrilled to have you back here. I want to say at the jump here a couple of different things about how to connect, but let's go ahead and introduce Evelyn, because she is an amazing clinician who's been in the field for over 30 years now, Evelyn?
Somewhere around there.
Man, it's crazy, but crazy good, because we love having an opportunity to talk to her. And you guys have this whole next hour to be writing in questions to ask Evelyn Kung, a true expert in the field of autism. So let's talk about how you can do that. There are many different platforms that we are on right now. If you are watching us live, you're probably watching us on YouTube, on Periscope, on Twitter, or on Facebook Live. Or you could be watching us on our website, which is now fixed. I'm happy to report, woohoo. So that's autism-live.com. Now, in any of those formats, you can leave us a question. If you're watching us and we're not live, I would encourage you to leave us questions on autism-live.com. But in our new format, the quickest way to get a question to us when we're live is on YouTube, Periscope, Twitter, or Facebook. They all feed right in here to Command Central, and we're able to see them in real time. Like, for instance, I'm saying good morning to Ria, and I'm saying hello to Johanny, who says, "Ooh, I made it. Hi from Pennsylvania." I don't know what was slowing you down so that you thought you weren't going to be here, but I'm glad you're here. We always like it when you're here. So if you would like for us to know that you're here, please write in whichever format that you're watching us live. Now, many of you don't get the opportunity to watch us live. We still love you. You can still connect with us. And I think the best way to connect with us if you're not watching live is to leave us a comment on autism-live.com. You'll see at the bottom, there's a chat button. That's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I check it before the shows to see if there's something, and we have questions today from that chat. That's autism-live.com. Now, when you're not watching us live, you might be watching us still on YouTube or Facebook or on Periscope or Twitter. Or you could be watching us in any of the things in the second column, which is where we podcast to. We are a free download on iTunes. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Ghana, Amazon Music, which is brand spanking new, Google Podcasts, stop, it's so good, Deezer, and many, many more. If we are not on your favorite podcast platform, please let us know what that is, and we will definitely look into it. We do have some criteria. Our thing is that we want it to be free for anyone who's watching. And we hope that you will tell us about places where you watch podcasts that are free to you. We like for it to be free for you. We're cresting our 10-year anniversary of being free to you. We do not spend money on marketing or publicity. We count on you to be our grassroots people. If you see something here that you like or that you think somebody can benefit from, there's lots of different ways that you can share and lots of different ways that you can help to support us to keep us on the air and going strong. Subscribe in whatever platform you watch. You can subscribe on iTunes so that you get the daily podcast. You can subscribe on YouTube. You can subscribe on Facebook. You can like us. You can tweet us. You like, there's so many different things that you can do. I'll tell you some of our hit parade right now that we really love. If you leave us a review on iTunes, that helps us to reach so many more viewers because it bumps us up in the ranking. Even if you don't give us a great review, it bumps us up in the ranking. So if you would like for more people to have access to this, share, like, subscribe, and review. Those are the things, right? Okay, so we've got a bunch of questions that are pouring in, and we have some that that we started from the website. And I want to start with one from the website, and then I promise I will get to you guys. Hi, Leanne. So thrilled to have you here. All right, first question, Evelyn. And by the way, welcome again, and thank you. And tell them we have it up there that you are the clinical director. You do so many things at CARD, the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. Is there anything you want to say before I hit you with the first question?
No, I'm just like, welcome. Thank you for having me. And I'm happy to help. And as you know, Shannon, my favorite thing is to problem solve.
Yes.
And that is the best for me. And I love doing it with the families here.
And she's awesome at it, can I just say. Okay, first question that came in on the live feature on Autism Live. My question, which I've asked to all of our doctors and therapists and remains unanswered, is why is my child talking, reacting, responding with opposites nearly all the time? I have heard of PDA and avoidance of demands, but it is not even about demands. Even if she suggests something, she will change her mind and say the opposite, even though she means the first thing. For example, she will ask to go to the bedroom, but mean the living room and actually walk to the living room while saying bedroom. She knows the right names for each room, but she will get aggressive and make sure you repeat the wrong word and then go. Sometimes, even when you do what she wants, even if it's the opposite, she will get mad and drop on the floor. And we have meltdowns happening every day. So we're sending some love to that caregiver.
Yes.
But what do you got in your magic bag of tricks?
Well, since I don't know her and I haven't seen her, I can only.
Well, thank you. That I forgot to give the disclaimer, and it's so nice of you to remind me that while Evelyn is a true expert in the field of autism, there is no expert that could give individual specific advice in this format. Not even Evelyn, as fabulous and sparkly as she is, it wouldn't be fair to the individual. So thank you for reminding me that, and sorry for interrupting you. Now you can go.
No, that's an important fact because there's so many things in play. I think in general, we talk about BCBAs coming in and doing a functional assessment and really see the functional behavior. By listening to all the different examples you give, there can be a number of things going on. Some of it is related to symptomology of autism, which is just being able to have some kind of self-control, and sometimes vocal inhibition is difficult. So like if you teach bedroom and kitchen and living room together, the first word if they are going to a room, they might just bring up the first word that comes into their brain in that category. So they're like, yeah, I'm going to the kitchen, and they're walking into the living room. In their brain, they might be thinking, yeah, I am going to the kitchen. Or, but it's just that if they have it sorted in some way where it's like all the rooms of the house are in one place, they might just say whatever category that first came in. And there's a lot of things to do for it, like teaching them to stop, think, and then say. That itself is a lesson that everybody needs to learn. And just like I need to stop and think and then say it, it requires a lot of like inhibition and learning how to vocal inhibition. So not to just stop talking, but to stop, think about the word. Is it the right word? It's the right word. Now I say it. That's a skill in itself that needs to be learned. But then the other part that you described about like, saying one, and then if you try to correct her, where she has a meltdown, that there's a number of things that could be in play. One can be like, this is a consistent interaction between me and you. So whatever you say, I'm going to say the other. And that's just the rule I've decided and how I interact with you. Or it can also be just doesn't want to be wrong. And so many of our kids, if your world is very black and white, if you're either right or wrong only, life is really, really hard because you're never getting better. You're either going to get punished because you're failing, or you're getting rewarded because you're right. And even if like we tell our kids like this, no one is perfect. Everyone mistakes, misspeaks, all of this. If that gray, the language isn't existing for all of that information, in their minds, they were either right or they were wrong. And that becomes a whole issue in itself about like flexible thinking and flexible thought and flexible language. You know, there's just a lot of things that could be in play in that whole interaction.
So first thing would be to be working with a BCBA who's trying to get to the function of the behavior, because you're going to be much more effective, because each one of those three things that you brought up, you would kind of go at them in a different way. Is that right, Evelyn?
Very different. Your teaching for each of those things is very, very different. And it could be multiply controlled or multiple function controlled, meaning in some situation it is because she just wants to be right. And in other situations, it is like, this is how I get your attention. And then there is just the skill acquisition portion of being able to stop and think and then say what you really mean.
Yeah. And I'm OCD girl. So I'm going to throw in there that, to expand on what you were saying about, this ritual that we do, that I say it, you say it, and this is what we do. And even, I know a lot of people don't like the Big Bang Theory, but many people do. But there's that thing that Sheldon does when he goes to a door, he has to knock 3 times, and doesn't matter whether it's right or wrong or upsetting somebody, or that he knows he's not supposed to. The running gag is that he'll find a way to do it because he simply must. And he's a very intelligent guy, knows that in some instances it's not appropriate, but it's a compulsion, and heaven knows I have a couple of those. So I really want to send hugs to this mom, but say really important to be working with a professional. Having said that, though, you brought up many different things, Evelyn, many different lessons, like flexible thinking and inhibition, and a lot of things that will feed into one of the other questions that we had, that somebody said, can you post the information about the ABA technician online training? They saw it in a July episode. And so I want to make sure every Wednesday we try to give you guys the message that we get from Skills Global IBT, which are 2 wonderful tools. And if you want more information about the kinds of things that Evelyn was just talking about, there are 2 tools, Skills and IBT. IBT stands for Institute for Behavioral Training. It's a online service that sells these wonderful modules, e-learning modules for you to learn all kinds of things. And they sell them, and they're very inexpensive, like wildly inexpensive. And I think they start at $7.50. So very affordable, but they are giving away free stuff. And I always try to let you know every week what the free stuff for the week is. So, and there are 3 different categories on IBT. There's for professionals, so they can get continuing education credits. There's for teachers so that they can learn about how to be effective with autism in the classroom. And then there are trainings for caregivers, for parents, that have significantly less jargon in them. But here's my favorite thing about it is they don't say to you, well, you can't get the expert ones unless you already have a degree. If you're a parent and you start out with the parent ones and you go, hey, I'd like to know the ones in the teacher category so that I can be more effective talking to my teacher, you hop right in there. You go right ahead. And if you decide you want to learn the things in the expert category and you're willing to wade through the jargon, you're allowed to be able to go in and purchase those. Now, the free things for this week, they said this week for our ABA parents and guardians, we will continue to offer our free IBT parent e-learning course, Parent Getting Started. So how to start ABA, which is really cool. For the educator community, if we have teachers that are out there, we will continue to offer our IBT educator e-learning module, Educator Teaching Communication. Woo, guys, like, and they're saying they're making it available to teachers at no charge. Tell your child's teacher about this week. It's only each week, it's a different thing. They're continuing to offer the RBT 2.0 training course, what the person was writing in on. That's a 40-hour course that technicians take on their way to getting their RBT, which is a registered behavior technician certification. They're offering it to parents for free on a case-by-case basis. So you have to call them, and I'm going to give you the phone number here in just a second, and tell them why you want it and that you're going to do it. Because a lot of times they don't want to give a 40-hour course to people who just want to take one class, right? They want you to commit to do the full 40 hours. Believe me, it's worth it. And then in addition to that, they're offering 10% discount on all skills products to anyone that calls and says you saw it on Autism Live, Say that, say I'm friends and family with Shannon. I want the friends and family Shannon discount. So you ready for the phone number, you guys? It's 877-975-4559. Again, that's 877-975-4559. And I'm not on that screen, but if I know Traven, he's got it on the screen. And he does, because he's like that. Sorry that I took so much time with that, but I vote that we go now to some questions that have come in on our chat. So somebody wants to know, go ahead, Evelyn.
Sorry. Just somebody just asked, since you just gave information for autism for the IBT, somebody asked how they can get skills too.
Yeah, so skills, and there's no better person to be on this show to talk about skills. Do you want to take a second and tell them what skills is?
Okay, so skills is the curriculum we use at CARD. There's two versions. There's skills, and then there's skills for life, which is for our older teens and adults. And basically, it's a curriculum that parents can go in, take an assessment on their child, and just go in and from the results of assessments of what the child doesn't have, they can go in and see different lessons and activities that they can go in and do on their own, or just look and get ideas about what's needed for all different categories. There's 8 curriculum areas in the basic skills curriculum, and it covers just a multitude of everything that you'd need to know in terms of child development.
Wonderful. And so the way you would get that is that same phone number, or you could go online and go to skillsforautism.com. I'm a ginormous fan of skills. I will tell you that it's the kind of thing, like a lot of things that are out there now, you can go in, I always say it's like a big shopping mall or Disneyland, right? And if you go in expecting to be an expert in one day on everything in Disneyland, or even expecting to get to all of the rides in Disneyland in one day, you're going to leave not having had a good time and feeling very frustrated and like you failed. So I encourage you to, before you go into skills, have an idea of what would I like? Would I like to know, for instance, where my child is exactly? Because you can do that. You take the assessment. Am I going in and I need help with the IEP? That's a very different experience, but it will help you with your IEP. Are you going in because there's one behavior that is really kicking your keister and you need to get control of that behavior? That's an entirely different portion of skills that we can help you to sort out. So I think, know what you want on day one, get comfortable with that, use that, because that'll be life-changing for you. And then ask, okay, what else can this puppy do? Because it can do a lot. But don't have the expectation of going in, and expecting that you're going to hit all of it in one day, or that you need to be able to know how to hit all of it in one day. It's unrealistic. It's a brilliant tool, does a lot. Don't try to use all of it at the same time.
Yes.
Is my advice. Anything you want to add to that, Evelyn?
No, just don't get overwhelmed by it. Just figure out what you need to know, and you can just go to that area and think, this might be helpful. This is open to both BCBAs and to families, or schools. So there's just anybody can access it, go in, find what they want. There's a lot of more explanation about, what each thing is. Maybe there's some area that you never thought of. So
and do understand that it's a subscription base, that there is a monthly cost to belong to skills and to keep your account. It's, I think it's wildly inexpensive, but I remember a time when it was too expensive for me. Do not feel bad about that. We've offered you a 10% discount, but if it's really cost prohibitive, make sure that you talk to them about it. And there are some grants available for families if they're really motivated to use it, and reach out to me so that I can tell you where to apply for those grants. Okay, so I have a question. I was doing ABA. He gained language and his receptive language is very good. He is engaging in solitary play all the time. At the moment, I've switched to intensive interaction. And then and then they were the ones who asked for the skills curriculum. I guess that was just the question. All right, if there's more to that question, let me know. Another person says, Evelyn, after pressing my BCBA for hours, I found out that we have 10 more hours not being used. Can we use it for support with dance, Cub Scouts, etc.? What out of center can we use it for?
To figure out what kind of funding you have. You know, is it 10 hours of school funded, or is it 10 hours of health insurance, or is it 10 hours of, you know, DDS funding, whatever it may be. So there are those guidelines. But for them, yes, because all of those settings are places to be social and places to generalize skills. So like Cub Scouts is a great place because Cub Scouts is a smaller group of boys usually, and it's usually around the same age. And every week is a different activity. And sometimes that is overwhelming for our kids because they like structure, and going in every week or every month and having just a different activity sometimes is very difficult. But we've had lots of our staff go with the kids into these community activities and work on the social interaction, work on following instructions, work on just imitation of skills of the people that they're with. There is a lot you can do in any of these settings. You know, what you don't want to do is put them in a setting that's going to be totally overwhelmed, or where your therapist can't do anything because it disrupts, you know, what's going on. But there's a ton of things that you can definitely do in every one of those activities. I've done dance, I've done music lessons, I've done baseball and soccer, karate, and, you know, everything else. Just, you know, the therapist who goes along is really just facilitating communication and facilitating skills that are that they've learned in the one-to-one setting, and then just need to generalize to these other settings. And I think it's a great way to use those 10 hours.
Yeah, you know me, I'm the biggest fan of this, about giving your program legs and taking it out into the community. I realize it's harder with COVID than it's ever been before, but you know, we took therapists everywhere with us. And I know I love me some BCBAs, right? I think I am BCBAs in general, their biggest fan. But I also recognize that as a group of people, they don't all think alike, and some of them are very in the box thinkers, and they're very rule following, which is great in some respects. But if they get in the box and they're following the rules in the box, sometimes we just have to remind them that there's more than one way to do something. And I have heard BCBAs say, well, you know, we can't go out into the community unless you have specific programs that are written for being in the community. And while there is a grain of truth to that, if I'm teaching you how to count, I can teach you how to count in the living room, and I can teach you how to count in the front yard, and I can teach you how to count in the car, and I can teach you how to count at a birthday party. You know what I mean? Like I challenge all BCBAs out there to look at the programs and go, could I only teach this in the setting in which we've scheduled the appointment? And I think you'll find that A, you can teach it almost anywhere, and that B, if you're following your rules for trying to have it happen in different settings for generalization, then you probably should. Am I wrong, Evelyn?
No, as a BT, my favorite place to generalize counting was the grocery store.
Right, right.
You can, any shopping place, you can count everything. You can count peaches and oranges and cans of things and bottles and clothing items, and, you know, any kind of business in terms of store, you know, buying. You can count 1,000 things. You can practice colors. You can practice shapes, sizes. And sizes is great because sizes change depend on what is present.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in one setting may not be big in another setting. And there's so much generalization and flexibility. And if you have I've heard BCBA say that, you know, or the health insurance companies say that they cannot do, they can't go to certain locations. In health insurance law, they cannot confine you to certain settings, because if you have diabetes, you should be able to have your insulin in any setting, not just setting. And that's really where all the mental health parity comes from, is if access, especially for autism, where, you know, overgeneralization or lack of generalization is an actual symptom of autism. So yeah, really matters.
We really need to get Julie Cornack back on here to give her little war dance talk about mental health parity, because there literally are federal laws that supersede state laws, you guys, that say that some of this mumbo jumbo that they say, oh, sorry, your child can't have therapy past the age of 8 because our mandate doesn't cover it, or things like, oh no, we can't do it here. Just like Evelyn was saying, no, if you can give your insulin there, then you can do therapy there. So we'll have to invite Julie Cornack to come, because she is, the person that has the expertise.
Wealth of knowledge.
Just like crazy good knowledge. Okay, moving on. So my question is, how old does a child need to be to start using the restroom in the right way? And my question is, how can we get our children to understand that pooping in the potty is a good thing?
Well, first of all, I just laugh at the definition of good.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, there's different times in our lives where, you can change the definition of good. And I think it's more, if you want to go along the autism realm, you would have to say this is the rule. And that the kids they follow along much more easily to the idea of this is what you're supposed to do than this is what's good for you.
Mm. Well, maybe that's true of all of us, maybe. Right?
So there's some rule governing that you can take advantage of, because our kids like rules, whether they can talk about it or not. They like that this is the one thing you're supposed to do. And you can take advantage of that for all your adaptive skills. This is how you brush your teeth. This is how you wash your hands. And if you give them that one rule, that's what matters. But I also understand that in toilet training, lots of kids, initially they do poop in their diaper. And maybe that's the rule that now needs to change. And that is really what the difficult part is they've made that rule that they only poop in their diaper in that corner. Then breaking that rule is the hard part, and teaching them what the new rule is about, pooping in the potty. So, and it's the same way about, I don't exactly know what the right way of toileting is. Sometimes it's like boys, do I stand up or do I sit down? That's the question. It really depends. But I always say when that's appropriate is really up to the family, because it's the family. This child lives in that family and has to function within the rules of that family or the culture of that family. And it is something that you decide with, as parents, like, when is it time? Of course, you need to make sure they're ready, right? Do they have the coordination sometimes to teach boys how to keep their pants on and stand up and go potty, pee in the toilet? Coordination issue more than the actual rule. Can they motor, through that aspect? And it might need a lot of practice and getting those motor to a level of fluency level, for those motor skills before they can actually make it a rule that this is how you go to, this is how you pee in the potty. And so really, I just say, like, is it right? It's up to the family to decide when it's right. But really the question I would say is, do they have the skills to do it? And first, initially for toilet training, it is the motor skills of how to the coordination aspect of how to do these things. And then it's like, if this is the rule, then you can work with your BCBA on how, you can put your child on a toileting routine. Or, if he has lots of grapes, he's going to poop in an hour. Use that knowledge and say, here, have some grapes, and then have him go sit on the toilet,
Right.
it's going to happen in the hour. And, you can really take advantage of some of that knowledge that you have about your child, because you guys are the parents and you're the experts, how your child's body functions. And there are a lot of BCBAs who can give you some instruction or direction about recognizing, what the antecedents are, or when the best timing is, or are they able to do this? And so talk with your BCBA. But if you don't have a BCBA, start looking through all of those factors. He follows instructions well, so maybe this is a new rule that we're going to implement. And if that he does have a bowel movement after he has those bowl of grapes, then time it so that you're able to be near a toilet during that time. If, your family really wants him to be standing up or sitting down or, whatever way to use the toilet that way, then it's just, you can show him. If he's good about imitation, he can model, dad or whoever it is too. And, use those skills, those strengths that we teach our kids. Back to that question about being, how do you teach play? I would say like imitation. The kid has to know how to use their body, how to use toys, and then imitation at a fluent level where it's easy before you bring it into a social setting. And it's the same thing for all those adaptive skills. Imitation, once it becomes easy enough, our kids will rely on imitation just like a typical child does. And that can work for all of those adaptive skills really well.
There you go. We've had a lot of people over the years write in, and I know my experience with my son, Card got us potty training in one weekend. It was just amazing. We had to do the upkeep on it, and I would say it took us maybe a month before we had it solid. And it was as much me having it solid because I had to be on a timer in terms of the pee and the potty. But a lot of what Card uses is the Fox and Azrin, which is part of what Evelyn was talking about. And you can look that up for the pee and the potty. But the poop was harder. The poop was just harder. And I got to say, every kid is different. But I know for a lot of people have written in, and my kid was this way, that there was something about that this part of him was leaving his body and it was going to go into this water place, and it was visible. It was a part of him, and it was going to be flushed away. It was traumatic for him. And, there were lots of things that had to be worked on in terms of that. And for a while, he had to do it in one of the little toilet seats that's separate. It has the little slide out tray so that it didn't go into the water. And then we would we take it and we flush it there to sort of bridge the gap. But the thing that ultimately did it, you guys, which is the thing we always get back to here on the show, is that the reinforcer wasn't there. He didn't have a reinforcer for the poop leaving his body in the toilet and going away. Card told us back in the day when there were toy stores, he said, take him to this toy store, shop for an hour, wait, put things in the cart, wait until he finds the thing he can't live without. And that was these canisters of Lego Knights. And we put the Lego Knight up on the toilet, the towel bar opposite the toilet. And we said, that's the Lego Knight. And you can have him to play with as soon as you poop in the potty. He got up on that potty and was like, not to get too graphic. He was like, how quickly can I get this out of my body? And then he would get the Lego Knight for the rest of the day. He would go to bed at night. We would take all of the pieces to the Lego Knight. It would go back in the canister. And we'd stick it back up on the towel bar. And in the morning, he would reach for it. We would say, sorry, you don't get the Lego Knight until you poop in the potty. And he would poop in the potty and he would get it. Now, eventually we had to go buy new Lego Knights because the reinforcer was like, I've played with that, right? Satiation. But that did it. That was him. Every child is different, but having a reinforcer, let's remember what's in it for them. Why you're all excited about me pooping in the potty, but what's in it for me, right, Evelyn? It all comes down to what's in it for me.
And it can be anything. I have a kid who likes cause and effect toys, or a ton of kids that like cause and effect. And flushing the toilet to see the poop go away is a huge reinforcer for so many kids. And that's so simple.
Right?
It's so simple. It's like a cause and effect toy. And you don't want them continually flushing. But if they can do that every time they have control of having a bowel movement to do it, it's a big deal. And you can make it a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. We've got this big conversation that's happening on Facebook. Somebody wrote in and said, please, what can I do to stop my 13-year-old boy with autism to stop laughing incessantly, unnecessarily? And people have been writing in and saying it might be yeast, and how do we treat yeast? And that would be my first guess, but you're the expert. Evelyn, do you have anything else that we should be looking at besides yeast?
Well, from the very behavior analytical way, I actually take data. When is he laughing? Where who is there? How do people respond to him? And just over days, every time it happens, you just jot down, where are we? What was he doing? Who was there? What did we say to him? And you kind of take the ABC data, you know, and you see some patterns. Because yes, it might be yeast. We've had lots of kids who laugh from yeast, but a lot of times there are really specific interactions too that happen. And it could be like what we talked about earlier about just if I do this, you respond a certain way. So I'm going to do this more because if I start laughing, you say this to me. And it's amazing how that interaction can turn into a routine, can turn into something that happens a lot, especially for so many of our kids. They do like people, you know, they just don't know how to interact with them. And so if they can create a way such as like, if I laugh, you will say something to me, I'm going to keep laughing because that's how I get you to interact. I don't have to think about words to say. It's not this whole process of how, you know, just of finding those words, or maybe they don't have words to say. And it's very simple, and it's usually pretty pleasant because if you laugh, people aren't going to scold you for it usually. People usually are pretty friendly about it. And so it can start off with yeast and then stay around just because it becomes a form of interaction. And then it turns into a habit. And then the habit, or maybe that what you were talking about, like the compulsive, like I need to laugh now because now they've discovered something feels good in them when they laugh. So there can be many stages of this laughter. And you really just, you take data first from the behavior analyst point of view, you take data, see when it happens. Are there any, you know, routines that you see, any patterns that you're finding? A lot of times you can find a lot of patterns. And then let's say if it is yeast, what I figure out is I start taking data on what they've been eating, what medications they've been on. Because, you know, like I used to walk into one of my kids who, anytime he had sugar, it would set off the yeast. And you could see the little bumps on his face, you know, just tiny little ones, not big. And then they would go away. So parents just never really looked at it. He'd get a little red, and I'd walk in and there'd be flaming. And I just look at the mom and said, has he had grapes today? She'd be like, oh yeah, he just had a whole big bowl. I'm like, oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
There it is. So you're laughing, you know, for the next 3 hours.
Yeah. And we will see that. I mean, you know, I think it's good to take the ABC data always, which is looking at the behavior, saying what happened right before and what happened right afterwards, because you will start to see patterns, and to include in that what your child has been eating if you're getting that kind of a reaction. Because some of our kids are sometimes it's yeast and sometimes it's other things that they're just food reactive to something. Other kids have the opposite reaction where they become mean and angry and have tantrums, but some of our kids, it flips and they laugh hysterically. I used to call my son the drunken elf, that he would act like he'd been drinking and he would laugh. And at first I thought it was cute, but then when he couldn't learn the alphabet because he was so busy laughing, it wasn't as cute, right? But there's the behavior side of it, and I'm so glad that you brought that up, because somebody brought up that mine laughs too because the mad face mom makes us too darn funny. Even my neurotypical kid does this too. I always say we don't realize it, but we are really good theater as parents. Like we don't know because we're busy being in ourselves, but sometimes our reaction to stuff is really good theater. Right. And the kids are like, well, I don't have control of the remote control, but I know that I can set mom off, and that staves away the boredom. So let me do this and that'll set her off and that'll be good.
Yeah. And even that whole, like with the neurotypical laughing, she gets mad. If you're mad and the kid does something sweet or laughs, it kind of diffuses the situation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a very like good coping methodology also for like that neurotypical kid. So maybe your kid with ASD has also figured that out, that she might have this really mad face, but then if you start laughing, she like mellows out.
Yeah.
Life is, you know, can continue. And so, you know, there's a lot of social interaction that happens. It's just that with our ASD kids, it's trying to figure out, they can't tell you. And the goal really all the time is like, can they tell you what's going on? And you know, I'm always telling families, like, even if your kid's really vocal, can your child really tell you what's going on in their head? You know, all those private events going on in your body. Because if they can't tell you that, there's still some language that needs to be taught.
And since we brought up diet, somebody said, are there diets available online for us to refer to? And we've done a lot of shows. You can go to our website, autism-live.com, and put diet in and see what comes up. But I got to tell you, the best, most comprehensive place where you're going to find information about diets for autism, including yeast, reducing yeast, go over to tacanow.org. That's TACANOW, TACAnow.org. This month in October, they're in the middle of their month-long virtual conference where every day they're having experts that are talking about diet and biomedical. I don't know if they have a late join price that's lower. The price to join on the first day was $50 for the whole month. But I would check it out, you guys. I've been trying every day to get over to the conference, and it's been so crazy busy. I haven't had time, but I want to. It's on my list of things to do. But they have more information about diet. It's a parent organization, TACAnow.org. That stands for the Autism Community in Action. So check that out. Okay. I know we have a parent that has written in more than once this morning, and I can't have her mad at me. She wants to know about, and now I've lost it in the crawl here, but she wants to know about auditory processing. Let me find it. What therapies are out there for auditory processing disorder?
Oh, this is,
Yeah.
I've been around this in the field long enough where we're in its second or third wave every 10 years. I feel like it kind of comes through again. There definitely many of our children have auditory processing delays, and your speech therapist can usually give some testing to see like what type of delays you have. The standardization on some of those tests are sometimes, questionable, but I think they've been really helpful for me. When I used to give testing, I used to do like, one of them was like, I think the Goldman Christo Woodcock test of auditory processing or test of auditory discrimination. And it's a really interesting one because there's these pictures, you say a word and they're supposed to point to the picture. And so you can get a baseline of what they know. And then you turn on noise, same vocabulary. And by what the kids miss from the noise, you can tell what sounds they're not processing at that level. So I can tell a kid, oh, you don't hear any of the voiceless sounds like p or h. So when those sounds are missing, our kids have a hard time. They're listening to you talk, but only those sounds are missing. So then it's not that they don't understand the words you said. They don't only hear and process these words with missing sounds. And then for anybody, that takes a while, right? Whenever there's a lot of noise in the environment and you have to sit there, and I'll have a delay. Like I'll hear something and then there'll be this processing. I'll be like, oh, this is what you said, And that's essentially like what happens to a lot of our kids. And for some of our kids, it's sound. And for some of the kids, it's the type of noise in the environment that makes them not hear everything or process what they're hearing. And, it's your speech therapist can usually give you like the diagnosis and can tell you what's missing. And then as for therapies, I've seen different versions come through the years. And I have, just in my experience, I haven't seen anything that's been reliable for everyone.
Okay, and they're wanting to know what test, and does CARD run that test?
We don't do it now, but your speech therapist should be able to do this.
What is the test?
There's a couple of different ones. There's the test of auditory processing. It's called TAPS, but there's a lot of different versions of them. And I think that if you have a local speech therapist who you can just call and ask, like, do you do any types of auditory processing assessments? Because I'm really interested in seeing, like, what is my child, what are they hearing? What's getting processed? What's a delay? And, right now I can't tell you like the recommendation for therapy because it just is varied. We've had a lot of different results from families. Some have tried it and they've spent a lot of money and nothing has happened. And then there are some who have tried it and it's been amazing, and then there's some who have tried it who feel like they need to upkeep it, right? So where they feel like as long as they keep practicing, there was something years ago called like aerobics. And I had a mom who, actually a couple of parents who swore that if they just kept it playing in the background, like at least once a week, their child's, it just seemed like their child processed questions and words much better. So they felt like there was a maintenance aspect to it. But, this is something that, you should look at speech therapists, because there are speech therapists who specialize in this area. And that would be, to go to them. And the way to work with it with an ABA program is to have the speech therapist do these and share the results with your BCBA, so that they can talk about like what the child is hearing and processing at a normal speed, and what is not, and what's delayed, and then trying to figure out like how can we practice these words or these methods. Or I've had kids who have auditory processing, but maybe they're hyperlexic, which means basically they can sight read words without ever having been taught. And then we use the hyperlexia to supplement, so that when we're in school with the kids, in their IEP, it says like all instructions need to be written, so that you have those accommodations of those modifications made. And it is you're not having to rely on vocal instructions, but you're using the strength that they have, so that especially if you know that they are having some auditory processing delays. So there's other methods of communication and other accommodations that schools and people will make if your child has another method to replace, vocal instructions. And the written instructions is pretty easy to do for schools. Your teacher might fuss about it, but in reality, if everything is written down, a lot of our kids have also a lot of executive function issues too. So maybe they heard it, but now they don't know where they put it, So, and they wrote it down, but they don't know where they wrote it down. And so if all of their work always comes with written instructions, you're kind of hitting two things at the same time.
Okay, we're getting a lot of questions and we're running out of time, but I do want to say that some of the therapies that Evelyn was talking about, that, it's sort of, some people have a big result and some people don't, and they're very expensive. You can look up Tomatis, Baralt, and AIT, auditory integrative therapy. They can be very expensive. I know this question came up a couple of weeks ago, and I looked back into AIT, and it's the cost of getting yourself trained and buying the equipment so that you can be an AIT provider is about the same as getting your child treated. So that's how expensive it is. But if you're interested in it, there are people who've had big results with this, and other people who have spent thousands of dollars and said, I'm not really sure why we spent those thousands of dollars. So, and I will tell you one of my favorite things, Evelyn. There's the whole section in skills. It's in the academic curriculum and the language curriculum of the academic curriculum that's all about phonemic awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And it's lessons to teach your child to distinguish between vowel sounds, because a lot of people, that's what the processing delay is having to think through, process it and go, I hear that sound. What was that sound? What is that word? And by the time they get there, they've missed something else. I think it's one of the coolest things that there ever was, the phonemic awareness section in skills. And nobody talks about it but me. I know that's an exaggeration, but I think it's brilliant. And before you go and spend thousands of dollars, I would take a tour of that section of skills, infinitely less expensive for you, and see if that gets it done for you.
Oh, that makes me feel so good, because that section was we actually took that from Common Core. We had to put all the curriculum into Common Core compliance. And so we went and we took everything that Common Core expected, and that's how we wrote all those lessons. So I'm really happy to hear that, because that was a lot of work.
I have written about it. I think it's one of the biggest, gold nuggets hidden in skills as a teacher, because I always get offended. Now, I don't teach anymore in a classroom, but I will go into a classroom to do a project with kids. I haven't done even that in a couple of years, but I used to do it all the time. I would go in and direct a play every year with different classrooms of kids. And it would madden me, because I would see one kid in the classroom that the teacher would say to me, oh, that kid's a problem. And of course, I hate that when they just label a kid a problem, right? And I'd be in the classroom for 2 days and I would be like, oh, I know what this kid's problem is, because you would see that if you asked them to do something, they wouldn't do it immediately, but they would do it later, right? It would take them just so much longer. And because I'm an autism mom, a mom of an individual on the autism spectrum, trying to say that way, I knew to give the instruction and wait and not keep giving the instruction. I knew to wait, and that kid would then be able to do it. And I would bring it up to the teacher and go, that kid's not a problem kid. That kid is processing. They need time to hear it, put it through this whole machine in their brain, and then know what's happening. Give them a little bit more time. And then I would turn them on to the skills thing. I think it's amazing. It's in the, again, skillsforautism.com. It's in the academic curriculum under the language section, phonemic awareness. Check it out. It's a pretty fabulous thing. Okay, we got to shove some questions here. A lot of questions about language, starting with a question that came in from somebody in the UK that they want to know what part of the brain deals with communication. I have an autistic son, 4 years old, nonverbal, looking for ways to help him communicate verbally. We also had somebody who said, why can my child speak, but we're not getting to conversation? That question a lot.
Yeah, I don't know about the part of the brain, but I do know that for kids on the ASD spectrum, if you're working on just like how to get them to speak, there's the motor aspect, right? There's that one aspect of whenever I get a nonverbal child in, I always ask, what do they eat? Because I just want to know if they chew. Do they have motor coordination to chew? And do they use their whole mouth, or do they always only use the right side and not left side? Because people don't think about eating as an exercise for all their oral muscle. And so many of our kids do come in and only eat yogurt or things that dissolve in their mouth, like chips and crackers. So they never actually really learn how to use their mouth. And then there's the whole group of kids that come in that have the tactile sensitivities within their mouth. And that's really like the first place I look at. And then let's say your child makes tons of noises and babbles and can even imitate and echo words, but won't talk. Then that's a different situation, Then all the mechanics are there. So now let's teach him. And what's the best way? You have to motivate him in order to be, those first words are all things that the kids want. All those mans, whether it's movie or chip or, juice, whatever it may be, it's starting from the need-based of what they want. And it's not so much the linguistic way of teaching where it's like, can you make this sound to make this word, to put it together, to form this word that one day you will use, but you're not using now. It's like really initially, it's like really, what does that child really, really want? And then does he make the sounds that, will work? And initially you might have to be flexible, because if you want him to say juice, but he doesn't have the j sound, then you're going to figure out, oh, but he has the W sound. So then maybe we'll just start with water and just start with wa, so it's like, you have to kind of think about like what mechanics are available. What do they really want? And then the combination will put together those first words for those mans and those requests. But if you're getting into like, why are they talking and being able to expressly say words is very different from conversation. Because conversation, it moves into a pragmatic understanding. It moves into the social understanding of the give and take of language. And initially, we want our kids to communicate. Like, if I ask for water, you're going to give me water, and understand, oh, this is the communication. And for our people who are nonverbal, that's one of the first steps is like when they manage, do they understand that they need to grab their iPad or they need to grab those icons? And if I give it to you, you're going to respond to me and understand that back and forth communication aspect. And then if you take it farther than that into conversation, there has to be a want and need back and forth. There needs to be some kind of desire to share, that there is some understanding that if I say something, you will say something back that I really, either it's knowledge because I love Thomas the Train and you just told me the name of a new Thomas Train I didn't know about, or if it's, for our older kids, they'll have conversations about politics because they love politics, but they're not so interested in the chit chat of every day of like, how are you? What's going on today? The very social, very, that information. There's a lot of other skills that need to be put in to conversation that are not just speaking. There's the idea of like other people, perspective taking. Other people think differently than me. So just because I'm thinking one thing doesn't mean that person's going to be thinking the same thing or have the same opinion or have only the facts that I know they know. And so there's like the whole cognition aspect of understanding somebody else has a different perspective than you. And, if you understand that somebody else has a different perspective and you know that you don't know everything they know, but you have all these interests, you're going to start asking questions. You draw that information out for a topic that you're interested in. And that provides the motivation to have that back and forth exchange. And it might not happen on every topic, but that's all of us, right?
Yeah.
If you start talking to me about some philosophical aspect of life, I may not be in the mood for this right now. And I ask very few questions. But if you find another person who loves philosophy and loves debating, the meaning of life, they can have 1,000 exchanges with you and be very engaged. And so it just depends on who you're talking to, when you're talking to them. And then it's teaching our kids that other people have things in them that they want, and it's knowledge-based or information-based versus just the simple exchange of I need water or, I want to go outside or we need to go to McDonald's or whatever it is, where it's need-based. And there's just a lot of difference. And I'm giving this kind of general arc of, learning and talking because I know our kids fall across the whole spectrum. And I'm to give everybody an idea of, where your child might be.
And we're just about out of time, but I just want to throw my 2 cents in there that, if you want your child to speak and be conversational, I think thing one is you got to be getting good ABA. Like a speech therapist is going to be very helpful for sound production and articulation and all of that. But speech is so intensive. You're not going to get that from a speech therapist. A speech therapist is not going to give you 40 hours a week. It's just not going to happen, right? Whereas ABA, you might be able to get 40 hours a week depending on the child. And that it takes a lot of time, right? And then I always say to parents, because we are the most impatient people and we want language and we want language now. We would like it all now, please. So I say the 3 Ps: patience, positivity, and persistence. You got to have all 3 of those. You got to be positive that you're going in the right direction. And if you're doing ABA intensively with a good company, then you are. So now you have to be patient and not expect it to all come today. For neurotypical kids, it takes years to learn how to talk and years to get to the point of conversation. Your child with autism is not going to get it overnight, but you want to keep moving incrementally. So you have to be persistent. You got to hammer, 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 and keep moving the goals. So if your child can say "ja" right now, yippee skippy, but then you're going to get them to say "ja-oo," "ja-oos," I want you. Eventually say juice, more juice, want juice, I want more juice, I want more juice, please. And then you can go into other things, right? But that takes time, y'all. And that takes persistence. You got to keep on keeping on. But you know what? If you keep on keeping on, you're going to see progress. If you're not seeing progress and you're talking to your experts, then they'll move to assistive technology and you'll apply the same thing to the assistive technology while still doing all the things that you were doing to get to the vocal language. And that's what the deal is. And you got to hammer that sucker every single day, every single moment of every single day. You have to, everything your child wants, they have to be asking for it, right? That's what it takes. Patience, persistence, positivity. You keep doing that. I don't know a single individual that has language that somebody didn't do that with them. The 3 Ps. I'm all about the 3 Ps. We didn't get to even half the questions. I'm so sorry. I talked too much. I apologize for my existence. But how fabulous is Evelyn? We thank Evelyn so much for being here. Tomorrow, we're doing a very special show where we're just talking about the fall of 2020. There are a specific set of things that it's unlike any other time in the history of mankind, and how we are managing the new playing field, all of us. We welcome your questions, and we've got some pretty exciting things for you tomorrow. And then on Friday, we have Vince Redmond, licensed marriage family therapist, with you. But can I just tell you guys, we have some guests coming up in the coming weeks that I can't wait to tell Evelyn Kung who we're having on in the show. It's gonna flip you out who we're having coming on the show. I'm waiting. There's one guest that I already know that everybody needs to clear the decks for November 5th. But I'm waiting to hear back about which of 3 dates that another person is going to be on the show, and it is big doings, you guys. I'm like stunned that this person is going to be here on the show and answering questions. I'm like, somebody pinch me. So stop. I can't wait. So thank you, Evelyn, and thank all of you for being here. We're going to be back tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now. Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod, and we are coming to you live from a place in my house. And that's pretty much where we're going to be pretty much all hour. But I just want to tell you, I'm so excited to be here with you this morning. Having an opportunity to talk with you and to hear your comments always lifts me up. This show is meant to be interactive. That's when I think it's at its best. And we really want this hour to be interactive today. And I'm going to talk about why in just a second. But first, let's talk about how you can interact with us. If you're watching us live right now, you're probably watching us on YouTube, on Periscope, on Twitter, or on Facebook Live, or you could be watching us on our newly restored and fixed website, autism-live.com. And I've been telling people, we'll go to www.autism-live.com, and you can again now, but before you could only go to autism-live.com, and I'm too old to understand the difference between the two, but it's all working now, so that's all good. But those are the places that we are currently live. I will tell you that the best interaction live in the current format that we are in is on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Periscope. We have it almost down to simultaneous. If you guys write things in, I can see them on my screen fairly quickly, which is really great because we like that real-time interaction. Now, if you want to watch us recorded, if you just found us and you're like, I've never seen this before, I want to let you know that we've been here for 9 years. I know, it's like, stop, shut up. You can't have been here for 9 years. But in some format, we have been on the air here for 9 years. So good morning, Amanda. I love your blue hearts all the time. So we have a library of videos, and what's super fun about that is that you can search a whole bunch of topics. We're available. The library is available in its best form on our own homepage, autism-live.com, or on YouTube. That's the best place to sort of search topics, and the search engines are a little bit different on each, so pick the one you like. But we also podcast, and I know a growing population of people are listening to podcasts in this great isolation, as they're calling it. And, you need something for when you're walking. We don't need things in the car as much as some of us used to, right? But you're going on a hike, whatever, or you want something to listen to while you're doing the dishes or the never-ending laundry of our lives. There must be a song about that, right? But we do podcasts. We have always podcasts to iTunes, but we also now podcast to Apple Podcasts, to Spotify, iHeartRadio, Ghana, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, and Deezer. We are on more than those sites, but we just ran out of places to squeeze it onto that page. But if you find that we are not in the place where you listen to podcasts, will you do us a favor and please alert us? We don't spend money on advertising, and we don't ask you to subscribe and pay to subscribe. That's something that we have fought very hard to be able to stay free to our viewers. If you would like to support us in that, please share us with people in your tribe whatever your tribe happens, whatever flavor your tribe happens to be, if you know people that could benefit from being here with us and that we could benefit from them being here and contributing, please let everybody know, right? You can like us, you can subscribe to us, again, free subscribe. You can join our newsletter, although we're horribly behind on updating our newsletter list. I apologize for that. We're running skeleton crew during COVID. But we also love reviews on iTunes. Honestly, even if you've got something that you want to say in the review about you wish we would do something better, we take that to heart. Hi, Parker. I didn't get to say hi to you yesterday. Thrilled that you're here. So please share us. That is how we count on having other people find us, is through you. You are our grassroots network, and we're thrilled to have you with us on this team. Now, I do want to take just a second to say that here on Autism Live, in general, we are talking to the really large autism community, which starts with people who are on the autism spectrum, of course. They are the beating heart of our community. They're everything. They're our why, and they are the central to everything that we do. But we also include everyone who loves them in our community. So together as that greater autism community, and by greater, I mean larger, not better, but that larger autism community, we work together to find resources and support for the dignity and the life of individuals who are on the autism spectrum, so that we know that they have the right to jobs and relationships, and to love who they love, and to wear the clothes that they want to wear, and to be able to do the things that they feel passionately about, right? Unfortunately, the rest of the world doesn't always tune into that. But we together, as that autism community, can help to affect change. And I've seen that happen. That's what we're here about here on Autism Live. That's who we're speaking to. We welcome everyone who is either on the spectrum or loves someone on the spectrum here. Let your voice be heard. Write into us. Let us know what kind of programming you would like. We do listen. We take note and we listen, and we try really hard to bring you what you ask for. I always say, I'm my part of the community here. I'm not an autism expert, not at all. I am the mom of an amazing individual who was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2.5, and who is brilliant and funny and wonderful, and I wouldn't change a hair on him. And but I live to support him and his dreams, to be able to do what he wants to do, and to have the right to do it without anybody standing in his way. So that's my thing that I'm here. I'm also a former teacher, so I have a particular love for all things educational and good education, right? And I am also a huge fan of good quality ABA, and I am a huge naysayer to bad schlocky ABA that doesn't take into consideration the individual. So let's put all that out there, right? But I'm not an autism expert. I've been hosting shows about autism now for, I guess it's 13 years now. So I've interviewed a lot of experts. I have an opinion. I call it an informed opinion. Hey, May, so thrilled that you're here. But please don't mistake me for an expert. And usually we pack the show with experts. Today I have expert advice, but I don't have any experts for you. It's going to be you and I and all of us in this community. And I'm a little relieved today. I love having the experts here, but I know a lot of times we don't get to all the comments and questions that you guys write in. And I'm hoping that we can get to as many of them today. But I'll tell you that a little bit later on, we're talking about a specific topic today, unless you guys, somebody said, and we love your opinion. Well, not always, right? Because you can't love it always. That's okay. We encourage everyone to have their own opinion here. It's okay to bring your dissenting opinion here. This is a safe forum. We don't all have to agree. This is not a one-size-fits-all community, right? I'm a woman of a certain size, and I hate clothes that say one size fits all. I'll tell you what else I hate is the ones that say one size fits most. That really cheeses me off, right? And I feel like a lot of the world, once I became a parent of an individual on the spectrum, I felt like a lot of the world was saying, well, one size fits most. So, you'll just have to make do. I don't subscribe to that. I just don't. And that's my opinion, which some people don't like. But, we all have to live with disappointment, right? So anyway, and and we keep a sense of humor about it. I never mind if you disagree with me. Feel free to shout it out and say, Shannon, I think differently than you, and it's okay with me, right? In fact, I kind of enjoy that. All right, so we've got a topic coming up later on, but before we get too far, why don't we get started with the jargon of the day? It's one of my favorite things on Thursday. This is when we take on one word, one phrase, one acronym. We try to figure out what in the hey nani nani are those experts talking about? Why should I bother to learn this term? What does this have to do with me? And really the bottom line is this going to save me time and money? And that's my litmus test. If it's going to save you 5 minutes and $5, I want to share it with you, right? And I don't want to overwhelm you with it. So first we give you the actual definition, and then we give you a working definition. And my neighbor is not my friend right now. They have forgotten what time it is, and they have decided to make their dogs bark and run their leaf blower. So please let me know if it gets obnoxious. And I will, do that thing where I yell out the window. It'll be good programming. In any case, take a look at what today's jargon term is. Oh, it's a goodie because it's one that hurts our heads sometimes. And I think it's one that you really don't hear unless you are deep in the autism community. Okay. So it is intraverbal. And I love May says, I always go to your videos when I have a term in school I don't understand. LOL. Love it. And Parker says, I don't mind that. I love dogs more than people. I know I tend to run that way too, but when they're barking in the middle of the show, hi, Jamila, when they're barking in the middle of the show and running a leaf blower, it's all good, right? Okay, so as I said, today's term is intraverbal. Let's take a look at what our actual definition is so we can make fun of it. And then we will move on to a working definition, which hopefully won't confuse you, but start you on the path to the beginning of understanding this, right? Intraverbal, an elementary verbal operant, nice, right? Involving a response that is evoked by a verbal discriminative stimulus that does not have point-to-point correspondence with that verbal stimulus. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a winner. It's useless. The only place that definition has any place is maybe in an advanced psychology class where they've already gone through the other jargon terms. I love it when the first part of it says it's an elementary verbal operant. I don't know about you, but it makes me just want to put my head down on the desk and cry. Because I'm how many years into this, and I know what the verbal operants are, but I don't know why they're called verbal operants. I know why they're called verbal, but I don't really get the whole operant thing. Operant sounds like somebody who works for the FBI, and to say that they're elementary, it's almost like you're calling me stupid. It's like, well, this isn't one of the more advanced ones. Shannon, this is one that you should already know. It's an elementary verbal operant. Well, thank you for clearing that up. Now I can go back to reading my magazine and figuring out how to solve the world's problems, right? So, and then great, it's evoked by a verbal discriminative stimulus. Woo, thank you. Thank you, because that cleared it up for me. That does not have point-to-point correspondence with that verbal stimulus. Oh my gosh. I think it's my most favorite useless definition in the world. Don't you just want to like take it, condense it, and drop kick it across the room and go, what an epic waste of my time. Let's swipe that out of the way. Let's just move it on down and let's go to a working definition. An interverbal is something somebody says in response to the language of another person. And this is a terrible working definition, which means I probably wrote it. And it says conversational language. But I will tell you, this is what all of you write in and say to me. How come my child, they can say words and they know labels, but we're not getting to conversation? What's up with that? Why can't my child answer a question that I ask? And it's all, well, it's not all, but it's largely in the interverbals. What you're asking for is for them to do interverbals. And it might help if you go back to your speech and language pathologist or your teacher or your ABA team and use that word and say, are we working on interverbals? How are we working on them? How are we working on generalizing them? That's what we really and truly want to know. Okay. We're hoping that the leaf blowing won't last long. You don't know my neighbor. It's a really bad thing. Okay. So, but please, you guys, if it's bothering you, let me know and I will stop everything and ask my neighbor to stop. This is 2020 and this is what we're talking about. Fall of 2020. How do we cope? And sometimes it's a neighbor with a leaf blower. But if it's stopping you from being able to listen, write it in the chat and you'll get to see me deal with it. And it'll be so very much fun. Okay. So, interverbals, it's what we're all hoping for. So when we start out, and the verbal operants are the different things along the way, that they're the building blocks that help us get to language, right? And you need different building blocks at different times, trying to get to the point where you are at conversation, right? So building block, we start with being able to match things. And then we try to echo. So if I say apple, that the other person says apple, right? And then we try to label things so that I can point to it and I can say, what is it? And that is the receptive that you're able to hear. What is it? But you're able to expressive say it's an apple. Before that, I say touch the apple, and we're just doing receptive because you hear apple and you touch the apple, right? And you need to be able to do both. It has to be able to go both ways. So when we start, a lot of times you'll see people hold up a flashcard and say, what is it? And the child says, it's a car. Great. But if we don't get to the point where, usually before we get there, we have to say, touch the car, that in order to get to the point where we say, what is it? It's a car, right? Usually, not always. Some kids, it comes different. But then we want to teach tacting, which is labeling it for the point of conversation. We did tact the other day, but eventually we want to get to the interverbal. And the interverbal, I won't show you a picture of a car. I won't say a car, but I'll say, how should we get to the grocery store? And I don't say, I don't give you multiple choice. I don't say, should we take a bus? Should we walk? Or should we take the car? I'm just giving you a question. And this is where that point-to-point correspondence, there's no point-to-point correspondence. So I haven't said a car, I don't point to a car, I don't show you a car, I don't hold up a picture or a text that says car. I just say, how should we get to the store today? And you have to sort through the files in your head and go, what modes of transportation do we have at our disposal, and pop up the answer and have it come, whatever way you express, whether it's sign or verbal, right? Forgive me, I just said verbal. What I meant to say was vocal, because verbal behavior is anything that communicates, right? Vocal behavior is speech. So it could be speech that I say a car, or I could point to a car, or I could sign for a car. Any of those would count as verbal behavior and an interverbal. I asked you a question. I didn't give you the answer in any way, shape, or form, and you had to go through your files to pull up the answer. That's an interverbal. And until we can do an interverbal, we're not really going to hold decent conversations. We see a lot of times that our kiddos will just label. And then if we don't get to interverbals, sometimes they will just monologue, where they talk to themselves, but we don't get that volley back and forth. But that's what the interverbal does. And we can teach this. We absolutely can. If a child is, see now the noise stopped, now I'm thrown off. But if a child is labeling, if they have the ability to label, we can get to the interverbals. It just takes a very specific teaching method, and it takes lots of prompting and tons of opportunity, you guys. This isn't something that comes in one day, 1 week, 1 month, even 1 year. So when I'm talking about intensive ABA, this is why. And, Dr. Granpeesheh was doing a speech not that long ago, and she was talking to parents, and she was saying the kinds of things that she always says and that we always say here about early intervention and about intensive. And at one point, somebody asked a really important question. They said, well, why haven't we gotten to this lesson with my kiddo? And she said, how many hours a week are you doing? And she said, well, we've been doing 15 hours a week. And Dr. Grampiche said, I want you to understand that in 15 hours, I can teach this. In 25 hours, I can teach this. In 30 hours, I can teach this. And in 40 hours, I can teach everything. And it was the first time, and I saw all the parents just sort of get it in that. They were like, oh, is that why you keep pushing intensity? Because it literally, if you think about, right now my son is taking, we bit the bullet, and we had Jake from Zeus Fitness, who we had on a couple of weeks ago. He's doing private one-on-one sessions with my son. And that's for 45 minutes a week. And he gives them things to work on during the rest of the week, which, that's great. And my son is working on them, and we're seeing a difference. We're absolutely seeing a difference. But I have a friend who paid for 2 times a week, and guess how much progress they're seeing? 4 times what we're seeing. 4 times, not 2 times, because it's cumulative, right? And by next week, it'll be probably 6 times, because the more opportunity that you have to do something, you get better at it. And then you come to the next section or session, and you're starting in a different place than where you started before, right? It's like compound interest. Language and teaching intraverbals takes a lot of hours for our kiddos, and it's a different amount per kiddo. There's not like a one size fits all, but it takes a lot of hours, a lot of hours. So intraverbals, it's the thing that a lot of you have been asking for. Ask the people on your team, are we ready to work on intraverbals? How are you working on intraverbals? How are you getting there? And it's a lot of little steps. You can't just jump to intraverbals. If you have nothing to say, and if you don't already know the labels, you're not going to jump to intraverbals. There is a whole category in skills that's just general knowledge. And until kids have that general knowledge, sometimes they don't have an answer for what you're asking. Oh, I love this. Somebody says the more balls you shoot, the more baskets you're going to make. It's true. It's true. So opportunity, and making it fresh and exciting and rewarding for them to do it. But you can get to the intraverbals. You really, really can. I started to say, I always tell the story about my mom came to visit, and I had told her she couldn't come for a while when we were starting ABA, because my mom, she was like me, really opinionated, and I was her kid. So, and I told her, I don't have the bandwidth for it, Mom. And when she did come, I said, I need 1 of 2 things. There's only 2 things I can handle right now, and that's support or silence. If you don't agree what we're doing, I need you to, zip the pie hole, because I don't have the bandwidth to deal with your doubts while I'm trying to figure out what we're doing. And I've done a lot of research, and I know we're doing the right thing, but I don't have the bandwidth to deal with your feelings about it. So support or silence. Woo, that didn't go over well. But in the end, best thing I ever could have said to my mother. And I encourage you to lightly tread there, but say it to the people that you love and want to continue having relationships with. But my mom came to visit, and we had the baby monitor set up because, we were in such a teeny tiny condo that we gave the entire living room, dining room area over to therapy. And my mom and I went and sat in the bedroom with the baby monitor. And my mother constantly was reading and knitting at the same time, but she's watching the monitor, reading and knitting and watching the monitor. And the first day she looked at ABA, she was like, oh, honey, this is so stupid. What on earth, And I said, no, just watch. And I knew where she was coming from, because the first day that I saw them, and, somebody asked my son, they put a car on the table and they said, touch car, in this very touch car kind of way. And I was like, oh, help us. We're never going to get to college with touch car. Are you kidding me? But I knew where my mother was coming from. It looks redonkulous, right? Not so redonkulous, smart. And so my mother was watching, and that whole week they were working on things, getting to the intraverbals with my son. So where they had taught him what a car was, he knew what that label was. The next step was that they taught him categories and features. So what category is a car in? Well, it's a vehicle. And what else is a vehicle? That a bus is a vehicle and a bicycle is a vehicle. Well, what are the features on a bicycle? What are the features on a car? And this was exacting sort of stuff. And it was painstaking, something I would never have had the patience to do myself. But the card therapist sat there and did it with him over and over and over again. And then they worked on other categories, right? He had learned a bird, right? But then he learned, well, a bird is an animal, right? And that there are different kinds of birds too. And what are the different features of birds and what are the different features of animals? So that by the end of the week, and I'm talking, my son was flying, and a lot of kids don't do this in a week, but my son did. And my mother had sat there and watched it. By the end of the week, the therapist said to my son, put a little 3D figure of Fisher Price from the Noah's Ark Fisher Price thing on the table and said, what is it? And my son was able to say, it's a bird. And a bird has wings, and a bird has feet, and a bird can fly. Woo! And, my therapist was like, yes, right? And he was like throwing him in the air. And my mother stood up and went, oh my goodness, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Somebody call the news. Why isn't this on the news every night of the week? I never would have believed it. They went from here to here. Like, who knew that's the way you teach that? Who knew? And just was so excited. And was a convert evermore about the thing at the beginning of the week that she was like, oh, honey, what if they sold you this bill of goods? And she was like, this is amazing. So I just want you to know it's interverbals you're seeking, and you can get there, but it takes a lot of hours. And by the way, we had to go from bird to being able to talk about anything, but think about how much common knowledge you have to be able to have those conversations. Thank goodness that the leaf blower is back. That's all I can say. We soldier on. That's what we do in the autism community. All right, let's move on to our next thing, which is our question of the day. We love it when you guys write in the answer to the question, your answer to the question of the day on whatever medium you're watching us. What's the best thing you have done during social distancing? What's the very best thing that you've done? And what's amazing? I love it when we ask positive assumptive questions, because it's assuming that you have done something that's great. So I love that. And I love that my gut reaction to that in the moment was like, oh man, there've been so many great things that we've done during social distancing. We've participated in a lot of different birthday parties with friends in the autism community and friends and family. And, but I gotta say, what I think is best, and it was the thing that was the hardest for me. My son and my husband wrote a little play together, and that there's a local theater group that does every other Sunday. They call it Zoom plays, and they do 4 plays. And they asked me if I'd have a little walk-on role in this play. And then suddenly I was playing 2 characters, and I was having to change clothes and run up and down stairs so that I could be on camera with one of them and run up and down stairs to be with the other one. And I thought it was going to kill me, and it was very stressful for me, and I complained about it a lot. It's the best thing we've done in this social distancing, because we did it as a family, and I was so proud of my husband and my kid. It was really quite fun. Parker says a few day trips, a trip to the ocean city, a lot of things. I love that. I haven't perfected the day trip thing. We get maybe 15 miles away from the house, and I got to be honest, I go, let's go home. But we haven't been to the ocean. I don't know where to go to the ocean where there wouldn't be a lot of people. And if somebody who lives in Los Angeles can tell me where to go, where I hear a lot of people going, oh, we went to the beach and we were the only ones there. I keep thinking we're going to drive all the way to the beach, and we will not be the only ones there. So let me know if you know where to go. Love it. But I'm hoping that you've done something great during social distancing. Okay, so here's what we're doing. Malibu, but aren't there going to be a lot of people there? That's what I'm afraid of. I will tell you the new thing that we're doing in our house, and this was sort of a hybrid that somebody was doing one thing and somebody was doing another thing, and we decided to put them together. We are every week picking friends or family that we love, that live close to us, and we take a bag, a nice bag, whether it's a nice shopping bag or, a nice bag. I actually ordered some bags with specific things on them for specific friends. And we're going around the house because we need to have a garage sale in the worst possible way. and we need to thin the stuff from our house, right? And we have a lot of cool stuff, which is stuff we don't use. So we are going around the house all week long, thinking of that person that we love or those persons that we love, and having a garage sale in our house and deciding to re-gift things that we have in our house for those people with love. So, sometimes, like, we have a bag right now that has a bunch of hot chocolate packets in it and a bunch of other things that, that we're not using. But it's so fun because then we call the family and tell them, listen, we're going to drive by and drop something off at your house. And so we drop it and then we call them and say, because it's good stuff, you guys. And we say, come to your door. We make sure that they're there. We drop it off. We say, come to your door. We wave at them so we get to see them for a second, and then we drive off. But it's so much fun in the days afterwards because they'll write and call us and go, oh my gosh, it was like Christmas. There were all these little things, and they were delighted with it. And I'm getting rid of stuff in my house. So it's cool because we have someplace to go. It's cool because we're gifting to other people and we're clearing clutter. I absolutely love this. Okay, we have a question, and I want to get to that before we go any further. Question. Some communities are allowing trick or treat with restrictions. Some places like Beverly Hills are not allowing it. My county is fully allowing it. What is your advice to help the autism community with this? Okay, my community is not allowing it. It's completely outlawed where we are because the numbers are so high. But if you are allowing it in your community, I would recommend a couple of different things. And it's so great because our topic today, we're going to be talking about how to deal with fall in 2020. So I'm going to put a pin right there and we're going to come right back to that. Let me finish up with what our topic this week is, and then we're going to come right back to the how to deal with Halloween for the autism community if it's being allowed. But we're also going to talk about when it's not being allowed, what we can do. So Traven, what is our topic for this week? Because I don't remember. That's terrible that I don't remember. Do we? And he's probably already closed all that out. You know what? If you don't have it, Traven, don't worry about it. We're going to go on to, because I know that our whole thing today was that we were going to talk about the unique challenges of fall 2020 and how we're all getting through it. So let's start with, managing stress. Well, that is a good topic, isn't it? I'm managing the stress of the leaf blower. There are words I want to have with this gentleman. But okay, so Halloween. Let's go from the perspective of if you're having trick-or-treaters come to your house. I really want to encourage people to have some creative way of distancing. If you are going to be handing out candy yourself, make sure that you are gloved, masked, and a face shield. It's the safest way to be. And I think you'll enjoy it more if you know that you're safe. Several people have come up with these really cool things. If you have time, because you've got a little over a week at this point, they've come up with this really clever thing where you get PVC pipe, just one PVC pipe, and you can decorate it however you want. And you put it on a slant so that kids come up to the pipe and you put the piece of candy and it comes down the pipe and can go into their bag, which I think is really clever. And I think the people who do that will be doing the coolest thing ever. I also want to say that I'm a big fan of the turquoise pumpkin. There's always a turquoise pumpkin movement at this time of year that if you put a turquoise pumpkin out on your step, it means that you are a home that offers treats that don't involve sugar. So we always have an array of pencils and like little shaker things and little canisters of Halloween bubbles. And we have they like spider rings. And the thing that's the most popular, and they're fairly inexpensive if you get them enough in advance, and I think maybe with a week you might be able to, is to get the glow sticks. So we get glow sticks, and my husband and my son and I have so much fun because we snap them all. Well, that's not true. We snap a large portion of them so they can get one that's not snapped if they prefer, but we'll snap a bunch of them and put them together in bracelets. And I've got a big, big bowl that's candy, and I've got a big, big bowl that's all the treats. And I got to tell you, over 50% of the kids choose the non-candy treats, which makes me extra happy. And it's very interesting what they'll choose. A lot of them like the pencils. Sometimes we have erasers. We make sure that everything is big enough that it's a no choking hazard, right? But overwhelmingly, hands down, the glow bracelets go first. They love it. And it helps, if you think about it, it helps with safety as the night gets darker. The kids put them on right with their costumes, and it's super duper fun. So that's if you're having Halloween trick-or-treaters come to your house, okay? If you have kiddos and you're wondering whether to trick-or-treat, I will tell you, there's a plus here, right? That a lot of people tell me about, oh, my kiddo won't wear a costume, my kiddo won't wear a mask, right? So some places are allowing you to do drive-by trick-or-treating, and then your child doesn't, you can put them in their pajamas, right? And stay in the car, and people are putting treats in the trunk. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If your kiddo will wear a mask, it's a great way to reinforce the mask wearing, right? But for a lot of us, we don't get to trick-or-treat. And if you have a child on the spectrum and you have concerns about your health or their health, I would encourage you to trick-or-treat at home. There's no reason why you can't do trick-or-treat at home. We used to rehearse trick-or-treat all the time at home. And what we would do is we would put even just one decoration on each door of the house. I mean, every bathroom door, every closet door, every door in or out. We put some little decoration on it. And we would, my husband and I, and sometimes I'd have a friend do it, we'd take turns, and we would have the kiddos stand on the other side of the door, knock, we would open the door, and they would say trick or treat, and we would give them candy. And of course, my husband, who's such a stitch, sometimes, you know, because we have different costume pieces around the house for various and sundry events and previous Halloweens and stuff. So he would be like a different person at every door and have a different voice and whatever. And you know what? It's okay to do trick or treat that way. It's absolutely okay to do that. I know people that have created, they're so clever. They have little kids, and they, from the beginning, they've created a pod. You could do it now. You have to find like-minded people who are distancing in the way that you're comfortable with, because you know, you have your limits. Everybody's different, right? And that's okay. You have your limits and other people have their limits. You just have to make sure your limits match up, because you're not only going to expose them to everybody you've seen, they're going to expose you to everybody they've seen. So you got to be comfortable with who is acceptable in that circle, but you create a pod, and it's got to be people you trust. And hopefully they have kids that play well with your kids. And so they're doing Halloween parties. Like they're doing, one friend is doing like an Easter egg hunt, but with Halloween candy. So they're putting Halloween candy in eggs and hiding it all over the place, and they have to go and find it. And they have all these games that they're playing. You know, I think some kids are old enough and aware enough that they know that they're missing something that they've typically done during Halloween. But if you think about it, the Halloween years, there's only a few years in the middle where kids get it and enjoy it, right? There's just a few years in there. And so a lot of kids aren't aware of what they're missing. It's more the adults. We know they're missing it. And we have to be open to looking at it in a different way. And one of those Halloweens that my son actually got it and understood that it was Halloween and what was expected of him, and he wanted to participate in it. I think I shared this the other day. I couldn't find a pumpkin. There was a pumpkin shortage. There was like a pumpkin blight where we were, and the pumpkins that had been earlier in the month were really expensive, and pumpkins go bad fast in Southern California. You cut them and the next day they're moldy. It's just one of those things, right? I couldn't find a pumpkin, couldn't get a pumpkin. I was like, I'm a bad parent. I've blown Halloween because I can't get a pumpkin. And Jem was doing well enough that, because of good ABA, he was like, well, do we have to have a pumpkin? Could we get a watermelon? And we were at Walmart, and there were no pumpkins, but there was a big thing of watermelon. He was like, why can't we cut a watermelon? And I was like, really? You'd be okay with that? Yeah. So we cut the watermelon, and we cut a pumpkin jack-o'-lantern face in it, stuck a candle in it, ate watermelon all night, and we're happy campers. And now the truth of the matter is all these years later, he always is like, why don't we do that every year? Why are we dealing with a pumpkin that gets moldy that we throw away the next day? Why aren't we just eating watermelon? It's just as much fun. It's easier to carve. Just saying. You know, sometimes doing it a different way isn't the end of the world. It's how we start new traditions. Okay, I love that you guys talk to each other and have different things to say. Trick or treating at home, great idea. Yeah, it's super fun, super duper fun. And by the way, you could even do it distance with some people. So you could take the iPad and stick it behind the door and have it be grandma. So they knock on the door and it's grandma, and grandma says, you know, hello, and they say trick or treat. Like, you could absolutely do that. Or have one of their friends from across town do it with them, where they carry the iPad around. I mean, like, totally can do it. I love that somebody's telling Parker, you're talking about the national, it's a question, you're asking the National Autistic Society, which is UK based one, have been with them. We'll see if they have anything going on. Yeah, that is what they're talking about. Yeah, maybe they're doing an event, or maybe you can say to them, hey, we'd like to do a Zoom event, and have people wear costumes and do that. Okay, so asking the school for help. I keep bouncing back and forth. I hope you guys are with me. One of the things that Bonnie Yates has suggested is that now we're enough into the semester, we've all given it a fair shot, a fair try. It's really important that if you haven't already, videotape what is not working. Show the fact that the computer is there, the teacher is talking, and your child stands for 5 seconds and then goes someplace else. If you can get someone else to videotape that you have to go get the child and bring them back and bring them to the screen to show that it's not possible without you motoring them back to the screen, right? And that even then it's like 2 minutes and your child goes. Now, a lot of you are feeling like, well, that's it. That's, game over. That's all there is. There's nothing else in the bag of treats for you. And this is not true. So, but the first step at this point is that you videotape, you ask the school, we need another meeting because the distance learning plan isn't working. It's not effective. It's not appropriate. And you have to use those words and you have to show them proof, right? You can also show them examples of work if you have them, to show that work is not complete, right? But you got to go in and say it's not working. You can think, well, what I'd like is this, right? It doesn't really work that way. It's not like a grocery store where you can order something up. It really is the responsibility of the school to come back and offer you something else. You will find, though, however, it's good to have an idea of what you'd like, because sometimes the school will say, well, we don't have anything else. There's nothing that we could do. Do you have any ideas? And then you can say, for instance, what some people have said is, we're getting really good ABA. They are coming into the home, or they're able to do telehealth with our child. We would like to utilize more ABA. Can you, if you will pay for the therapy during those hours, they'll work on the IEP goals, and your ABA provider should be able to do that. I know I just blew some people's heads up, but that's the truth. If your ABA provider, if they have goals from the school with the IEP and the school is paying for the hours, they can work on educational things. A lot of times your ABA provider will tell you that they can't work on educational things. That's because your current funding source doesn't allow for it, not because they can't teach. Your current funding source says we're not working on anything educational. That's the school's responsibility. They have to pay for that. But if the school pays for it, they absolutely can work on educational things. I got to go to the other to be able to see what you wrote. A lot of parents are on standby and not really speaking up to the school as to what their needs are or what issues they are having. I noticed that they're a lot more involved when you communicate more with the school. Hard days, you log what happens and let the teachers know what's not working and what you want to change. It's true, but we don't have to. We don't have to just stand by, right? I think that there have been some people, let's be realistic here, there have been some people who went back to their school district, and the school district has been not helpful and said that's all we can do. Okay, when you get to that point, you document it and you make the decision, are we going to continue on with this, or are we going to give them notice that we're stopping? You have to give them 10 days notice if you're going to jump to anything else, 10 business days notice. Like if you're going to go do a homeschooling program, you got to give them 10 business days that you're going to do that. And then you can do pretty much whatever you want. If you decide to pay for a service, you have the possibility of asking the school to pay for it later on, but you should never enter into that thinking, oh, I'm going to get this money back. You might, you should, but you may not. We don't know. And no one would know, even in non-COVID times, no one would know for sure. But you'll have the right to ask for it if you've given the 10 business days. I think sometimes when you give them the 10 business days and let them know that they're going to lose the income that they get for your child attending school, sometimes schools are much more amenable to trying something different with you. So good morning, Christina. And but it's really important that you speak up about it. Now, we've got a few minutes here, so I want to talk about other things happening this fall because, I know we're just a hop, skip, and a jump away from Thanksgiving and Christmas and Hanukkah and many other holidays that folks celebrate. And somebody said, so that's what I did. I told them it wasn't working, and then I withdrew the kids 2 weeks later. I hope I did it right. Did you give them written notice that you were going to be removing them and it had in 10 days before and then remove them? Because if you did, then you absolutely did it right. 10 business days, that's what but it has to be in writing. I'm removing the kids. I'm giving you my 10 business days notice, and then you remove them. So I think, looks like you're probably okay. So let's talk a little bit about Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, and holidays coming up. Because they're different. It's COVID. You're going to have to make decisions about how you want to social distance, if you want to social distance, if you want to be in a pod. If you're wanting to do a pod, what they're saying is that this is going to be many more months. And if you have the opportunity to do a pod with someone who has children that your child plays with and that you get along with, I'm encouraging you to reach out and find people you feel secure with to do a pod. Your child does need interaction. We don't want to go a whole year with your child not interacting, but you got to be as safe as you can possibly be. But pods with limits are working for families. I know someone who, a group of moms got together and they said, we're going to do things this way. And they hired a teacher. And they take turns every week. They have a classroom. I think there's 7 kids in the pod. The classroom is set up so that they're at a different house all the different time. They're going to spend the holidays together. And it's their little pod. And I think that that's a great solution. We don't all have that possibility. We just don't. That's not a possibility for everyone. And you're going to have to make determinations. I know Dr. Fauci had said this might be the Thanksgiving that you have your family on Zoom and have Thanksgiving dinner with family across the miles, and don't travel and don't sit around. There's always that thing about, the great feeling of putting your shoes under a table together with people you don't get to see all the time. But I have to say, we've done Zoom meals with people and it's quite enjoyable. You get to have the conversation and check in and everybody eats their food and it's kind of fun. It's exotic, it's weird, it's different. It's something that you can do. I really want to encourage everybody that if you have special diets, that you are already starting to pre-order things that you will need, because we are seeing that there are shortages for things that are specific dietary items, that some weeks they're available and some weeks they're not. I'm not talking about hoarding at all. We don't want to see any hoarding, but making sure that you have the things that you need. Amanda, it looks like you did it perfectly, so I don't think you need to worry. Yes, and I know in the UK the Thanksgiving thing is not a big thing, but it's a big thing here in the United States. But you guys have other holidays, like I'm thinking about Boxing Day and things like that we don't have. I wish we did. But there are holidays coming up, and there are holidays that are today. The subject we're talking about, things that come up in fall of 2020 and how to cope with them. That's what we're talking about today, and managing the stress of that. So, be thinking ahead. Everything in COVID, you got to think just a little bit ahead and have your plan. Implement your plan as best that you can. And like any holiday, you have to be willing to go with the flow a little bit. that things are not always going to work out the way that you wanted. I know for my son's birthday, my son was turning 17 in June, and I ordered his birthday presents a full month in advance. I was like, well, certainly they'll be here by then. But we were having riots on the week of his birthday. So the gifts were coming. The gifts could not get to our house. And he didn't get, he got his first birthday present. It ended up coming around 10 o'clock on the night of his birthday, and everything else came like 2 days later. And you know what? It was what it was. And we found other things to do. But I know if you have a special gift that you want to get for somebody, think a little bit ahead. Order a little bit ahead, because things get wonky, things get weird. So do what you need to do. And then even if you plan ahead and you plot ahead and you order ahead, it may not work out the way that you had planned. Keep a sense of humor about it. Enjoy time together. We all need to get our grateful on, and to remember that we're here. I'm going to get emotional, but I'm thinking about one friend of the show who today is dealing with COVID, and she's been keeping a daily diary, and today's was so painful to read. And she's a wonderful autism mom, Liz Becker. She does the blog and the books, The World According to Matt. And she's struggling right now. She's struggling to be able to breathe and trying to decide when to go to the emergency room. Let's be grateful that we're not there. Let's all think good thoughts for the people who are there. And let's do what we need to do to support them. And we're out of time. I want to tell you that tomorrow we're back here with Vince Redmond and Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson, and we are going to be talking about managing stress. And if you guys have questions, Vince is a licensed marriage and family therapist about how to manage the stress. Please be with us. If there are specific things about this fall that are hard for you, write and let us know, and we can take those on as well tomorrow. We got some huge guests coming up for you in November. I cannot wait to reveal to you guys some of the guests that we have coming up in November. I think it's going to be our biggest month ever. It's huge. So thrilled to be here with you guys. Such a privilege always to be with you. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.
I didn't see the open for the show.
I know. I think we just did the one opening, but
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe we're going back to it now. I don't know, Craven. Are we going to do the opening for Let's Talk Autism? It might be stuck. All right, so let's just go to us. Good morning.
Okay. Hi, Shannon.
Good morning and welcome to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. I'm Shannon.
And I'm Nancy.
And we're already off to the races. It's like, is it Friday the 13th? It feels like it. It's a crazy morning. But we're here, and that's the important thing. And we're going to be here with you for the next hour live, Nancy and I together. And I'm so excited to be here with my good friend, Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson. How you doing, Nancy?
I'm doing good. It's good to be here with you, Shannon.
It's good to be here with you, too. I got to admit that, we always like to start the show by having a little moment of honesty. I like to think of it as, and I want to put it out there. And I think, we have a topic to talk with Vince later on, but I also want to put this out there. I have been struggling with some anger. And, and in my morning meditation this morning, I had to ask myself, okay, because last night I was saying to my husband, why am I so angry all the time? And I don't know if anybody else can relate to this, but I realized this morning, I talk about this all the time when I speak, is that, anger is the easy emotion, and that there are a whole bunch of emotions that at least and I know other people have said that they feel this way too, that when I'm feeling grief, when I'm feeling fear, when I'm feeling out of control, when I'm feeling shame, or, any one of those emotions, they're too hot for me. I can't stay in them for very long. And so what I do is I just move over to the easy emotion, which is anger.
Uh-huh.
And I find myself angry a lot, but that I'm reminding myself this morning that I can dig a little bit deeper and go that, it's fear and grief and a feeling of not I want to control everything. I am a control
Right.
freak. That's where my
Me
OCD
too.
stems from. Really? Do you feel that way too?
Yeah, definitely.
And when I can't control the big things in life, I get angry because
Mhm.
I can't sit in the fear and the grief of that.
Mhm.
So anyway, I'm just putting that out there. That's how I am this morning. Angry, but acknowledging that it's more than anger. How are you, Nancy?
I'm okay. I've been feeling a little overwhelmed. That's my go-to, is feeling overwhelmed as opposed to sad or angry or depressed. I tend to just let it all pile up and then feel overwhelmed by things that I don't want to deal with things.
And I feel like this time of year is kind of power packed for a lot of people, just in any year.
Uh-huh.
Because we get into the holidays and the holidays bring up memories. And look, you don't get to be our age and not have some good memories of things and people that aren't here anymore, right?
Right. Right.
And so I think that plays on it a little bit, but I think it's extra with everything that's going on right now. I think it's just extra, and that we're all a little bit worn to the bone. And you're feeling your go-to is that you're feeling overwhelmed, and my go-to is that I'm just angry. I don't think anybody, it's so good that I'm doing social isolation right now, because I don't think anybody wants to be around me, because I'm such an angry gut. I just think people are over me right now. So putting it out there.
Is your anger directed at anything specific? Or
Oh
is
my
it just
gosh, it's broad spectrum, Nancy. It's
okay?
broad spectrum. And I mean, some of it we're going to talk about in our first news story. Like, I was so mad yesterday that I was like, literally thinking of driving to where this place is, that this occurred to
North Carolina is kind
testify.
of far to drive to, Shannon.
Yeah, I know.
North Carolina is a long drive.
Yes. So let's get right into it, shall we?
Yeah,
Let's start with the worst story. So and we're referencing the particular article that we're referencing is from CNN, about a mother of a 7-year-old with autism who filed a lawsuit after a resource officer handcuffed her son at school. Can you see where I'm going with the anger here?
And pinned him to the ground, a 7-year-old.
Yeah, and a lot of times now, stories will post a link to the body cam footage, and I'm somebody who should not watch the body cam footage because, I don't handle it well, and I didn't handle it well, and I want to caution people, that you don't need to see it unless you need to see it. But man, am I mad. Man, am I mad. And I want this mom to know that I stand with her on this, and I have a lot to say about it. But let's hit some particulars. That I tend not to want to say names, especially of the younger person that is involved in this. And I'm not going to say the name of the officer because I don't want to get into like vindictiveness against one person, although I'm pretty upset with this officer. This is from it's in North Carolina, the city of Statesville. And it was a Statesville police officer who was serving as a school resource officer at the Presley Alternative School. Let's say the names of those places. And the boy was enrolled in a day program there, has
Right.
a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder.
Uh-huh.
And he was enrolled in this school because they are affiliated with a nonprofit behavioral and mental health provider. Okay. And then I don't know exactly what happened before, and I want to acknowledge that. And I don't think Nancy knows exactly what happened before, but what we're told is that the boy was spitting.
Yeah.
And I just want to pause there for a second and say that this was in 2018. This wasn't even in COVID. So in 2018, this boy was spitting, and you know, I don't know what led up to the fact that they called in this resource officer who's supposed to apparently keep the peace and keep behavior well. But this guy, who is no longer on the police force, according to local reporters, he quit. Gosh, you think? Right before he was going to get fired and sent to jail. This happened on September 11th, 2018. Okay. So did you happen to see the video, Nancy, or did you spare yourself?
I did not look at the video.
Well, good for you, but it doesn't show what led up to it. So we have to keep reiterating that. However, I've worked in a classroom, former teacher, have dealt with, and you and I have both dealt with 7-year-olds who are on the autism spectrum, both of us. And to be fair, both of us have gotten injuries. You know, we've been scratched. I've been bit. I think you have too. You know, so we understand what a 7-year-old on the autism spectrum can do. There were, in the video, it starts and there are two people holding him down while the officer is talking to him in this very calm way and saying the most insidious stuff about, are you familiar with the juvenile delinquent system? Well, you're going to get familiar today, aren't you? And he said, you're going to be charged.
Yes, he also threatened the boy by saying, after he put him in the kneeling position with his arms pinned behind him, said, if you spit on me, I'm going to put a hood on you.
Yes, you're absolutely right. He said that. I stood up and yelled at the video when that came up. I was so mad. And when they're putting the handcuffs on him, he's very calm. They're able to put the handcuffs on and then they lower him to the floor. And here's the thing. There's two people who are sort of one who's helped holding him down to get the handcuffs on, and somebody goes and gets a pillow for him. And they lay him on his stomach on the pillow. And then the officer, Mr. Wonderful, says, are you okay? Can you breathe? And then sits there and talks to him about, I don't know, sports and all this other stuff. But every once in a while says, well, you know, you've met the wrong person. You're not going to get away with this kind of BS in this very kind of, you know, I'm a nice guy sort of way. I think it's over 28 minutes that he laid there on the floor with his face on a pillow until his mother got there and lost her mind. And you see in the video, because it's all edited, but you see that she's like, you know, and they uncuff him and she immediately picks him up and he, you know, is attached to her and they sit there and she's holding him. And I think every mother can relate to that pose. And I will tell you that the boy laid there calmly for over 20 minutes and the police officer kept touching him. At one point, the police officer wiped tears off of his face. And finally, and he kept like taking his arms and touching his arms. And finally, the boy starts to cry and says, get away from me. Stop touching me. And he's sobbing. He's sobbing. And I, like, that police officer deserves to never be in law enforcement again. But I'll tell you who I'm mad at. And I'm so glad that this mom is suing the school. Because whoever those two people were who stood there and said nothing and didn't call the police on that man, the mom, he has not been able to go back to school. The mom has had to leave her job to homeschool him. I hope she takes that school to the cleaners, because I'll tell you what makes me so mad. And this is where my anger, is that I know it's hard. I've worked in school districts before, and I know when you are a person that's there and somebody's doing something, I know it's hard to speak up. But we are charged. If you are working in a school, then you are someone who is known as a court reporter. You are legally responsible to stand up for your kids and to report when someone is doing something that is hurtful to them. And that includes the people you work with. That is a legal bond. And if you don't do it, you are personally legally responsible, and the school that hires you is legally responsible. So I am thrilled that this parent is suing, and that she's not just suing the police department, not just suing that police officer, she's suing the school, and she should be. And that's why I said last night, I was like, I want to drive there and testify for her, because the two people who stood by should feel very badly. And we want to send a message to people that we don't stand by when people are treating our children horribly. We cannot afford to stand by. And
I was really shocked that this school, which is basically a special needs school,
well,
This is
they're
not-
affiliated with a program, so they should know
Affiliated.
better. They should know better.
yeah, they should know better. That's what I was shocked about.
And you know what, Nancy? Maybe they did know better. And that this police officer was just one of those power hungry people who was like, I've got a 7-year-old boy. I think I'll teach him a lesson.
Right.
But the people who were standing there should have said, what are you doing? And, you know, maybe if they were like, okay, he's going to handcuff him for a minute. But when he was saying, I'm going to put a hood on you, when he left him there, whoever went and put the pillow under his face knew it wasn't right. And they stood there and we have to teach the public, you have to pick up your phone and call for backup. And we have to speak up and say, why are you doing this? He was just spitting. And then we need to get people in those classrooms to teach them, what do you do when a child is spitting? And okay, you know, you hired this resource person, but he's not trained to know what you do when a child is spitting. The whole thing makes me so mad I could spit. It's just absolutely, but I think the thing that upset me more than anything else was the people who stood by.
Yeah.
Because we're always going to have people who are ignorant and stupid and abusive in our lives. But what is the saying about, you know, it's not one evil person, it's the 10 people who stand by.
That don't do anything.
That's the thing.
True. Yeah.
And we've all got to steel ourselves. And I know it's hard. It's very hard. But we have to steel ourselves to stand up to this kind of behavior, whether it's in the workplace or on the street corner. When you see something, you have to be willing to stand up. And yes, I know what I'm asking people to do, because sometimes you end up losing your job over it. I'm well aware of that. But you know what? Those people have to be sick to their stomach that they stood there. They know it's wrong. They know it's wrong. We know it's wrong. And I'm glad that mom knows it's wrong. And I'm glad that she's suing. And I hope she takes them to the cleaners. Horrible.
Agree.
Horrible, horrible, horrible. All right. Some better stories. To some extent.
Somewhat better. Hold on. I'm looking up the stories on my phone right here.
Okay. So let me just start with saying this story is coming to us from Spectrum News, a respected outlet that we love. And their article on eyeing the connection between autism and vision. And I was really interested in this because I don't think I've ever really... I've noticed more and more that people are reporting that their kids with autism. I know my son went to a developmental ophthalmologist and we uncovered an eye issue. And that helped once we identified that, it helped him with a whole lot of things. But they're saying that they're seeing overwhelmingly that there are connections between sight and issues with sight, in particular, blindness. Nancy, did you?
Right. This was a shocking number. Yeah, I was really shocked at the number they quoted here. Autism is at least 10 times as common among blind people as it is among the general population. That's a huge number.
It is a huge number. And, you know, it made me stop and think. And I was like, well, gosh, I do know a lot of members of the autism community that are blind. And I never really put it together about statistically. But there was one thing in this article that I went, okay, this is something interesting. That in 1956, you know, if you think about this is the dark ages of autism. In 1956, they did a study of 60 children with retinopathy of prematurity, a condition in which light capturing tissue at the back of the eye does not develop properly. 60 children. 5 of those children turned out to be on the spectrum. And if you think about that, at that time, there was only 1 in 1,000 children that got an autism diagnosis, that 5 out of 60 of those children had this, out of 60 children that had this very rare thing, the retinopathy of prematurity, 5 of them ended up being on the autism spectrum. So, and it goes on to say that there have been many more studies in many countries about the prevalence of people who are blind being on the autism spectrum. I just had no idea about this. And the fact that it's not something that's new, that they first were recognizing this in 1956, kind of blew my mind, Nancy. What about you?
Yeah, it blows my mind as well. And they're saying there's the variety of explanations about this correlation between lack of eyesight and autism, that a lack of visual input may disrupt some aspects of social development and lead to autism traits.
Yes. Yes, which is a very interesting way of looking at it, right? And, I'm always interested in what's the takeaway. And the takeaway for me, it just reminded me that here on the show, that we've had people who specialize in eye issues on the show before, and it reminded me that we need to get them back here, and that we need to put out the call to everybody that have your child's vision checked, and that it's not enough to just go to the eye place that happens to be in the mall that you're in, that you might want to have your child looked at by somebody who's a little bit of an expert. It's rough because a lot of those developmental developmental ophthalmologists suggest that it's easier for your eyes to be checked for different issues when the child is like 6 or 7, right? Because it's hard to check their eyes otherwise, because they're asking them to check in on things. And when, even for kiddos on the spectrum that are non-vocal, it can be hard even at that age. But it makes me want to work closer with developmental ophthalmologists to see if we can't find ways of having earlier testing. I'm going to be looking for doctors who know more about this. There's a wonderful doctor in Scotland who we've had on the show before. Joanne Lara actually turned me on to him. And he does a lot of visual things with, he talks about the fact that people who are on the autism spectrum, sometimes it's not just that they're not interested in features. Like we've talked before on the show, the studies about, kids on the autism spectrum don't orient to people's eyes, and that they're not as interested in people's facial features. But he said sometimes they're not seeing them, that it's like a form of dyslexia, that the facial features are skewed, that it almost looks like a Picasso painting to them, which is fascinating to me. And he does some very interesting studies. You know how, because I used to work in the classroom with kids with dyslexia, and they discovered that there are sheets of plastic that are different colors, that if you put a sheet of plastic over text, for some kiddos with dyslexia, they're able to read it because they're seeing it through the blue plastic. For other kids, it's a sheet of like more of a rose colored plastic, and then the words don't jump around just by putting a color over it. And this doctor has discovered that by putting those glasses on kiddos, that they stop toe walking. And that, there's one video that he showed me of a teenage girl, and he said, okay, I'm going to put my hands up. And this was something that the developmental ophthalmologist had done with my son. But he said, okay, I'm going to put my hands up. Can you, and in front of you, can you see both of my hands? And she says, yes. And he says, I'm going to be moving my hands outward. Tell me when you can't see my hands anymore. And he only got about this far. And she said, I can't see your hands anymore. And he said, you can't see my hands right now? You can see them now, but you can't see them now. And she said, yes. And he sticks the rose-colored glasses on her, literal rose-colored glasses. And he says, okay, can you see my hands now? Yes. 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 And it's like it instantly gave her peripheral vision, which, if your field of vision is here, think of all the social things you're missing.
Right. You're missing.
So fascinating stuff. Okay. Then our next story is from another trusted resource, Medical Express. And I have a feeling that in a couple of weeks, this might be included in something that our research person, Leah Hirschfeld, might be coming and talking to us. But I couldn't wait to just bring it up because it was brand new yesterday.
Right. This is something that I've heard discussed before, but this is
Yes.
a actual evidence found of a link between gut microbe deficiency and autism spectrum disorder.
Yes, and in fact, CARD was doing a study that was similar to this study, and I want to make sure that we let Dr. Dixon see this. So this is a study that just came out. It's affiliated with a host of institutions in China, finding this gut microbe deficiency in children. And basically, they started with a small study, and they looked at the microbes in the poo. You heard me before talk about the CARD poop study, right? Very similar to this. So 39 children that were diagnosed with ASD, 40 children that did not have the disorder, so that they're the control group, right? And they looked at the poop in both of them. And they were careful with who the 40 children that they picked that didn't have the diagnosis, because they wanted to make sure that they were the same age, that all the other things would be equal and even, like they lived in the same part of the world, that they had the same sort of diet, so that we couldn't explain away any difference in their gut microbiome by something like, well, they live in the Netherlands and they live in China and their diet is probably different. So I thought that was great. Now, in the CARD study, they were taking a look at CARD clients' poo, and they were looking at their siblings' poo, and they were looking at other children from the area that didn't have a diagnosis and didn't have a sibling on the spectrum. So in any case, they looked at 18 different species that were linked of microbial species that have been previously linked with ASD, and they saw that there were marked differences between, same thing that CARD found, that
Right.
you could pick out, like there were clusters, and it was like, here was the cluster of microbes and it was all the kids with autism, and here were the clusters of microbes and it was all the kids who did not have autism.
The key here to me, the sentence here that jumped out to me, Shannon, was the team found difference in the ratios of detoxifying enzymes in the children with ASD compared to those who did not have it. So it gets back to that detoxification mystery.
And this, because CARD, I don't think was looking at this. So this was what was different for me about it. And the thing, and I want to find the sentence in here, but they're saying, you know, we've all known for a long time that our kids, for whatever reason, their bodies don't have the ability to take out the trash like other people do. So, you know, if they get exposed to something, it's going to have a bigger effect on their body because their body can't cleanse it.
Right.
And I, you know, Jem has skin issues and he's had them since birth.
As does Wyatt.
Right. And Temple Grandin was the first person that like said something about this publicly. She said, you know, I travel everywhere. I'm in airports and I'm here and I'm there. And people come up to me and say, oh, you know, Dr. Grandin, we love and admire you. And that she was sort of doing this informal study for years, that she would say, they would say, we have a child on the spectrum. And she would say, how interesting. How are they doing? Hey, do they have skin issues? And they would go, yes. And she would go, let me ask you something. Do you have skin issues? Do either of the parents have skin issues? And she was finding that everybody was saying yes, yes, and yes. And that she was like, there's something here, somebody needs to be looking at it. And our pediatrician told us early on, they were like, you know, this is your child saying my immune system is struggling to catch up. When he was a baby, well before autism diagnosis, and said, you know, this is whenever you're having skin issues, the skin is your largest organ, and when stuff shows up on the skin, it's saying other parts of your body are struggling because the skin isn't quite handling it well. So I just thought that there was a part in this, and let me see if I can find the sentence that was really made me jump out. The researchers acknowledge that more work is required, but also suggest that it might be possible to create a therapy that assists in the detoxification process, thereby heading off the onset of ASD, or better yet, to overcome the elements that lead to detoxification problems in the first place.
So if they found children were not infants were not detoxifying, they could head off the onset of the ASD symptoms possibly.
And, you know, in a beginning study, that's a pretty bold statement.
Yeah.
So I thought that was pretty interesting. And I know, you know, the CARD research, they were looking at it in a very specific way and seeing that there was a difference in the Clostridium.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have to get somebody to explain to us what that means. But you know, the fact that you can look at somebody's poop and see clearly who the kids are with autism, we're getting there. We're getting there. And it's not just one study that's finding that, it's multiple studies. And I think when everybody gets together, they're going to have some really good answers for us. And I'm encouraged by that. So that's wonderful. Now, I believe that we have Mr. Redmond with us.
Oh, good.
And let's pause for 1 second because I've been looking at we've got Vince. There he is. Fabulous. I just want to address, hi, Vince. Vince Redmond, licensed marriage family therapist. Vince, we're just going to address, because some people have written in, I'm saying hi to Amanda and to Arl and to Sarah and to Moons of Roses. What a lovely, lovely name for Facebook. And saying hi to Michelle. We're so great to have you here. And we're saying hi to Diana and to Nature Love.
Yes.
And they've got a question, and maybe we can have Vince help us to answer that question in just a second here. But Vince and hi to Maria. So thrilled that you guys are here with us. So Vince is a licensed marriage and family therapist, but Vince is extra. He's like a unicorn because not only is he a licensed marriage and family therapist, but he has worked extensively in the field of autism and even came into the field of autism as a behavioral technician. So he gets it on a level that we need more people to get it. We're thrilled that he is here. Vince, we love you so much. And I'm so glad you're here with us on this Friday morning.
Thank you. Thank you. How are you ladies?
We're good. It's good to have you here.
Good.
Well, and you know, Nancy's being politically correct, but I'm going to share with Vince that when we started the show, Nancy and I always sort of take our temperature. And I said, I'm struggling with anger issues, Vince. And I'm struggling with anger issues. And I was thinking about it this morning, and it's just anger masking all of the fear and grief and loss and lack of control that I'm feeling. And Nancy, do you want to share what you said you were feeling?
Yeah, I tend to go to the overwhelmed part of emotions. I get overwhelmed when I feel like I don't have a handle on things and I can't control things.
So that's,
I think it's all that control issue. Yeah.
So that's where we are, Vince. And we wanted to be honest with you and with our viewers. But we asked you, Vince, to come and talk with us today. Our overriding theme for the week this week on Autism Live was managing stress. And I heard a lot of people say this week that everybody's over our current circumstances, and that there's a certain amount of critical mass that we've reached being shut up with the same group of people. And people are shut up in different ways and different amounts. Some people are going out into the world. Some people are taking the isolation really seriously. But I wanted to talk a little bit about, even no matter how you're doing it, you're still a little bit more isolated, or a lot more isolated than you used to be. And I was wondering if we could get some advice from you about, like, how do we manage that when you just like need to find your corner and you haven't had any time away. I love being home. Being home doesn't bother me at all, but I also need a certain amount of free time. And I said to my husband the other day, you know, I've never spent so much time with my husband, and I love him more than I ever did. And I found out I really like him. But every once in a while, I got to have alone time too. And it's really hard in this COVID thing to, you know, find that time. What do you got for us?
So let's back up to the beginning, right? Everything that both you guys were experiencing and that you were reporting is mirroring probably what 90% of everybody that, you know, that is watching is feeling, right? We have a sense of loss of control, right? We can't go out to where we want to go. We don't get to see who we want to see. We're not able to celebrate the way we want to celebrate. And as far as I know it, everybody in California just had all of their holidays canceled, right? So, you know, the way it is you know, we're living in an environment right now that is completely different than what what we're used to. So, however, is that a loss of control? To some extent, it's a loss of opportunity. It's a loss of rituals, routines, and celebrations that we're used to. But we look within ourselves, we look within our environment, we look within our I guess, you know, families that we're around. What are the things that we control? What are the things that we can experience? What are the things that we can do differently? And what are the things that we can change for the positive, right? I think a lot of things have been forced upon us to change, right? I mean, it was slam the door on March 16th, and that's it. You can't go outside. But then as things have evolved, we now and I hate using this, but I'll use it anyway because it's a very common term now. Using our new normal, right? We have our new normal, and that includes masks and temperature checks and limited lines and reservations at Target and that kind of thing. I think that's the next thing right now that they're talking. Target, Walmart, Best Buy, having reservations for the holidays rather than letting people just go, willy-nilly. So with all that being said, we have all of these controls or all of these changes that are happening at the same time. If we remember, human beings, as a being, we do not do well with change. We are habitual, routine creatures, and we fall into these routines because they give us comfort, they give us security, and it gives us predictability. When that changes, we get very anxious. When we're not able to have direction with it, which, let's be honest, we haven't had a whole lot of direction. It seems to change week to week. That creates anxiety because there's no predictability. And then we lose our sense of autonomy because we're being limited on our freedoms and the things that we used to have. So that's creating all this anxiety. This is creating all this change because, again, by nature, we do not do well with change. And even positive change, if you really think about it, we don't do well with positive change either. We can go from, let's say, a 1-bedroom apartment to a 4-bedroom house. And somewhere along that line, we will try to convince ourselves to stay in the apartment. Because
that's just human nature.
It's human nature.
Is that just? Yeah. Okay.
So that's what we're experiencing now. We're experiencing that pullback of, I want it the way it was because that's where my comfort is. That's where my security is. That's where my predictability is. However, that's not going to happen, right? That's at least not for anywhere in our near future. So we adapt. As we all know, humans are extremely adaptable and we will adapt. But now it comes with our choices. Now we choose to try to resist or we try to adapt. And that's where every family, and like you were saying, Shannon, everyone has different dynamics that are extremely important, extremely valuable, extremely truthful, right? With medical fragility to, a size of family, location of family, and the such, right? So we have to look at establishing new routines, establishing new traditions, establishing new celebrations, right? Not just not doing them. And I think we kind of did that. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think we all kind of did that for the, we're on 7 months now, for the first 3 months. I know I had my 50th birthday and did nothing. It's supposed to be a monumental birthday. I had dinner. I took a drive in my car. That was was really it, right? We didn't do anything because we thought this was temporary. We thought this was going to be over soon. But now that we know this is elongated, it's going to be a long time, we have to establish these new routines. Coming into the holidays, I think it's important that we celebrate. I think it's important that we create those celebrations, either it be religious or it be through family or it be through, new routines, new traditions, while keeping some of our old traditions, right? Keeping close to family that are safe, doing the same celebrations, through the religious holidays, through Thanksgiving, even coming up with Halloween, right? We all know that at least here in California, Halloween and trick or treating have been highly discouraged and told that that they're not allowed. Okay,
Yeah.
doesn't mean we can't dress up. Doesn't mean we can't have little celebrations with a limited amount of family members, maybe a friend or two, if you feel that they're safe, right, and they're able to come to your home, right? Create a celebration. Don't discard it completely. Same for the holiday or for Thanksgiving. Same for Christmas. Same for Hanukkah. Same for all of our traditions in new coming holidays that are going to be 2020. This is the start of them, right? So if we build those routines, we build those celebrations, we start to create enjoyment again. We start to create things that we look forward to again. We start to create things that bring our family joy. And as we all know as parents, if our family's happy, that we're happy,
Yeah.
right? But it's different. So that's what makes it really hard. And I think that's where our anxiety kind of waver up and down.
Mm-hmm. And are you finding across the board that parents are feeling this anxiety? It's just really widespread and common.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So everyone who's feeling it, know you're in good company because we're all feeling it. We're all there. And I think to varying levels, everyone is experiencing this because, as I had mentioned, this isn't a female thing, a male thing, a Nancy thing, a Shannon thing, a Vince thing. This is human beings. We are habitual routine creatures. And so we struggle with change, even though it is either forced upon us, something that we have no control over, like a pandemic, or it's something that might actually be something that evolves us, something that creates new ideas and new situations. And going back to Shannon's comment, right? Finding new levels of relationship with our loved ones, finding things that, hey, I actually really like my husband. I actually really like my wife. My kids are good kids. Those type. It doesn't hurt, to figure those things out, because it forces us out of our ruts. It forces us out of our routines. And so we're actually experiencing more family nights, more traditional dinners, more game nights, more actual conversations about what people are doing in their lives. How was your day? I haven't had as much conversation about my day ever. It's now to the point, well, nothing's changed. Pretty much the same as yesterday. I kind of feel bad because I run out of things to talk about. But that's good, right? That's obviously a good problem to have, because that means as a family, more people are talking, more people are sharing, more people are communicating, rather than mom going to this room, dad to this room, kids to this room, and we kind of do our own thing. Now, to touch on, go ahead, Shannon. Go ahead.
Yeah, when you use that term "new normal," one of the issues that my son Wyatt has been struggling with is thinking this is going to be over soon. Like, okay, in November, we're going to go back to being normal. Yeah. And he keeps saying, are we going to go back to being normal in this month or this month? And it's very hard for me to explain to him this could go on for a really long time.
Right. And I guess some of it is what the definition of normal is. What is, you want to identify, and for Wyatt's sake, identify what is he missing? What are we missing? What are our kids missing? What was changed in their routine that they're missing? And then see if we can find a replacement for it.
Okay.
Right? And put our heads together and find what is the replacement for what's missing. Because normal obviously is, there is no normal, there's just life, right? That's the old adage. is what is he missing? What does he want? What does he feel restricted with? And it could be access to friends, access to school, access to, outdoor sports,
Right.
access
All those
to
things.
some creativity, some, I know why it's extremely creative. So, maybe it's, painting classes or being around other people that are creative. So we have to find ways to replace that and give some type of equitable replacement. So I understand everything's virtual now, but maybe it's a virtual class, or maybe it's a limited number of people that you feel safe, that they're able to get together outside and maybe paint or draw, or again, I'm just using that as an example, but for whatever it is that we're missing, right? I know for me, I could just speak for me, my new normal and the thing that I'm missing the most is sports. I haven't played soccer and I haven't reffed soccer since March, right? And I was telling my wife last night, I was just like, I miss you. I turned it into a little 5-year-old because we were talking about something and it just kind of came up and it hit me like a brick. Like, I severely miss being out there, being with, my friends. These are people that I've been with for a long time. I miss them. I miss the camaraderie, as well as I miss having, that fun every weekend. So what do? We have to adapt. We have to find ways to find other fun, find ways to connect in other ways. Now, one of the things that you guys had mentioned early on was finding our independence, finding the time that we need by ourselves, right? And the way I always view this is I always view our lives in 3 buckets, right? We have an individual bucket, we have a couple bucket if we're married, and we have a family bucket, right? All of them need to be tended to. All of them need to be addressed. So if we put everything in family and we do everything for family and we're doing, the virtual school and we're doing all the chores and we're making sure everyone's happy and we're running around left and right, and we forget over here ourselves, it all starts to fall apart, right? It's unbalanced. If you put these all on a teeter-totter, it's extremely unbalanced.
I would say it's worse than that, Vince. As you were saying that, I was like, ooh, my buckets are messed up because I have the work bucket, I have the mom bucket, and I have the family bucket. There is no individual bucket and there's no couple bucket. I'm in trouble.
Yeah. So we got to find those buckets, right? We can go to the garage,
Are
find a
they in
bucket.
storage? Where are they? Are they
They're
in
somewhere in the
spirit?
garage, up in the rafters. We're gonna have to go find some buckets.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
because to address it directly, we have to tend to ourselves, right? So if you need time to yourself, which we all do, we find time for that. Sometimes it might just be in, if we have younger kids, it's while they're at virtual school. Even though we're still there, find time to read your favorite blogs or your paper, or read a chapter of your book. Find time to have that cup of coffee and sit out on the swing while your child engaged in treatment, right? Find those pockets of time. It might not be the amount that you would prefer, and it might not be the way that you used to do it. But as we were talking about, finding new ways to find that is important, and take advantage of it. 15 minutes by yourself is much more healthy and is better for you than not doing that at all, right? So if we just do chore after chore after chore, expectation after expectation, back to back, and we don't find those 15 minutes, those nuggets of time, we have to find those, right? Like Amanda just had written, find time to watch your favorite show. Absolutely. And the good thing nowadays is it doesn't have to be total show, right?
Yeah.
If you have one of your favorite shows is an hour and you get 15 minutes here and 15 minutes there, that's okay. Take advantage of it, because then you look forward to watching the next part. We're looking forward to watching the next episode. That gives us joy. It's anticipatory joy. We look forward to what we're going to do next, and that encourages us to then do it. But
Yeah.
if we don't have that and we have nothing to look forward to, we don't place that carrot or that nugget ahead of us, then we're not going to do it.
It's really true. We should do a whole show on what everybody has watched in COVID, because TV, like, we've caught up on some stuff that I had never seen an episode of Game of Thrones. Never, not one, not ever. And we watched the whole thing. as a family, and it was a thing, and we had a time every day that we would try to, if it worked, sometimes other things interfered, but we really look forward to it. And we've gone through many different series, but I was just saying to my husband last night, we're kind of between series right now. We haven't gotten into another one, and I feel a little bereft. But let me, the new one that I love the most, if you're at all a history buff, The Great. Have you seen that? Oh my. And Matt Asner is the one who turned me on to it. The Great. It's about Catherine the Great, but it's a very funny retelling, a modern retelling of how she rose to power. It's hysterical.
Really?
But very timely too.
Okay.
It's with Elle Fanning. It's really good.
She
really,
plays
really good.
Catherine. She plays Catherine.
Yes, and she's very good. I derailed us for a second, but I want to talk shows at some point. Hey, before we run out of time, Vince, we had somebody write in a question, and since you're here, they said, my daughter answers and follows directions when I insist for her to do it, and I have to raise my voice. How do I get instructional control?
Okay. Choices and consequences is something that we have to look into, right? What's happened is that she's been conditioned to ignore you until she hears your tone reach a certain level. And then that activates her to attend. Good news is she attends. Good news is she's compliant. So she's actually reading it. The problem is what happened is over time, she's just learned that when mom speaks in regular tone, sometimes I don't have to do it. Sometimes I do. And it, kind of varies. But when mom hits this tone, nope, gotta do it. Because if I don't, I'm going to get in trouble. Right? So what we need to do is retrain it. We need to make sure we use our word. And it's funny that I'm saying it this way, but we have to use our words. I sound like I'm a PT again. And we have to be very clear. So we ask, let's say it's clean up our room, which is one of our most traditional commands, right? So we say, okay, you need to clean up your room. And then you walk away. You come back and they're still playing, they didn't clean up. At this point in time, you need to give them choices, right? It's not 5 more times. It's not 10 more minutes. It's not later down the line, right? At the second time, you come in and you say, okay, I see that you didn't listen. Here's your choice. You can clean up your room, and then we can go to dinner, and we can go to the next activity, or we can continue to have fun, or whatever is next on the agenda. Or you can choose not to clean up your room, and you lose, we'll say, your American Girl doll for the rest of the week. Or your iPad will be gone, all your electronics will be gone until Friday. So you make a choice. It's up to you. You can clean up your room and everything's good, or you can choose to keep playing and not clean up and lose your American Girl doll. Make a good choice. You leave, you come back. Now your choice is, you have no decision making now at this point. The decision making is purely on the child. Mm-hmm. If they cleaned up, great. You praise them, you give them loves and kisses, everything's great. The child now feels good because they listened, they made a good choice, they got reinforced for it. More likely they're going to continue to do that. However, they will test at some point because they're not sure if this is going to be 100%. So if you come in and they're still playing, you say, okay, that was your choice. And you take the American Girl doll and you walk out the room.
I love that.
Most likely you're going to have someone chase you. No, I'm sorry. But you stay neutral and you just say, all you say, look them, get down to their level, look them straight in the eye and say, next time, make a better decision. This was up to you. Next time, make a better decision. You will learn from this. And then, of course, you're going to keep the doll in however long you said you were going to. Because what you're teaching them is you're teaching them that they are in control of their choices, not you. They can't blame you for something that they knew what was going to happen, and they chose it. That's up to them. They now need to, they need to experience that. That's natural learning, right? Natural consequence. So however, make sure that when they do listen and they do clean up, you give them as much praise, love, kisses, high fives, tickles, everything to make sure that they know mommy and daddy are proud of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that. I just would add that, each kid is a little bit different. For my son, we would have had to have started with an antecedent thing first, saying, hey, guess what? When your room is clean, we're going to go and do that thing that you really like to do. So, but first this, then this. So that then it would be, then when he didn't do it, I would say, we're not going to be able to go and do that then. Right. So that it was something new and novel that he was going to get to do, as opposed to taking something that he already had away. That
Yeah.
I just always found that worked better for him. And I will also say too,
Yeah.
that what's scary for me as a parent is that, whatever you put in place, you got to follow through on it, right? So be careful what you put in place. So if you say you lose your American Doll for a week, you're going to have a week of misery. It's got to be enough for them to want to do it. But the one thing that we found with Jem was, and we had to be very careful so that we were following through, but in a circumstance like that, and I want to know what you think, Vince, because I don't know if this is for everybody, but for Jem, we found this. So if we had said, well, you have to clean, we were going to watch this movie that you want to watch, but you have to clean up your room.
Mhm.
And then he wouldn't clean up his room. And I would say, well, okay, then we're not going to be able to watch the movie. And you're right. We would get this hysterical, like, and I could stick to my guns, but I wouldn't put a time limit on it. So I could stick to my guns and I could say, well, you still could clean your room.
Mhm.
I understand you're feeling this way about it. And I'd be walking away, I'd be like, you still can clean your room. And if you did, we could still watch the movie now up to a certain point, when it was bedtime. But like, we always were interested in knowing what the out was for him and what the out was for us. It always had to do with compliance. But I think Nancy can speak to this too. There's nothing worse than when you put out a consequence and go, if you don't do this, then there's going to be this consequence. And then you realize, oh crap, now I have to carry through on that. And I'd rather die than
Right.
do what we just said we would do. So we have to
You
be
have to
very
really be
careful.
careful about what that consequence is.
Right.
Yeah, because you're
And the
stuck
good
in
thing-
it.
And make sure that you think about 100% agree. Make sure you think about consequences before you lay them out. Because if we do this emotionally, our kids would be in their room until they're 30.
Right.
Or, you do that again, you're staying in your room till you're 30. Well, obviously we can't do that, but that's what we say. But we're also seeding in their minds now that what we say isn't necessarily true.
Right.
Or it's not, it's fluid, means I probably can get this back sooner, which is going to increase whining, it's going to increase asking, it's going to increase begging, and a lot of other behaviors that we don't want. So 100% agree. I always tell families, if you're at Disneyland, don't ever say, if you do that again, we're leaving. Because I don't know any family that can spend $500, $600, $700 to go to Disneyland. The kid acts up and they're going to leave.
Yeah.
Right? You can say, we're not going to go on that ride. We're not going to get cotton candy. We're not, you're going to have to miss the parade or something like that. That's something that can be done. But like you said, be very conscious, very, very aware of what are the things that you can follow through with that will be effective.
Yeah. I just want to say that earlier Amanda had said, one of the things that I do to find me time is I find time to watch my favorite show. And then I immediately start talking about Netflix. And she said, you guys, I was talking about this show. How sweet is that? This is her favorite show.
Very, very sweet.
For you. We adore you and your blue and multicolored hearts. Anyway, we're out of time, Vince, but we adore you. And this was so helpful today. I got a lot out of it, and I hope everybody else did too. So thank you so much for being with us. We do want to point out that you have a very special role at CARD, but that you also do, am I correct in saying you also do private work with people, LMFTs for families?
Yes, I do have a private practice here in Southern California. So if you have any questions just about the things that we bring up during the show, you can always email me. I don't know if you guys have the email, but it's v.redman, my last name, which is on there, at centerforautism.com. So you're more than happy to email me things. or any questions. And if there's anything else I can help you with, you can always reach out.
Thank you so much, Vince. We so appreciate it when
Very
you come.
helpful.
Great. Have a great week, ladies.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Okay, so Nancy, we just have a minute and a half here. I wanted to take a second
You
and
wanna
say
talk
that
about what's on next week?
that we've got some big things that are coming up on the show in the month of November.
Okay.
That next week on the show, we have our regulars, right? We have Bonnie Yates, who's going to be here on Monday. We're doing more of our Temple Grandin Marathon on Tuesday. On Wednesday, we have Dr. Grant Boucher. On Thursday, we have Elaine Hall from the Miracle Project who's going to be joining us. And then on Friday, we're doing our very special Halloween episode.
Right.
You will not want to miss. Over the years, Nancy and I have done some very impressive Halloween costumes. We're
Mhm.
hoping not to disappoint this year. What was your favorite all time of the costumes that we did, Nancy? What's your favorite?
I think the Queens. Queen
It's funny. I was
Elizabeth.
going to say the same thing.
You did the current Queen, and I did Queen Elizabeth I. And
Yeah.
I think that was the first year we did Halloween costumes.
No, we did Lucy and Ethel the year before.
Oh, we did Lucy and Ethel
You
before.
were a fabulous Lucy. I was a terrible Ethel. Then we were the two queens. Then I feel like we were what's her name? Martha Stewart
And
and
Julia Childs.
Julia Child.
Yes.
And then you were Ellen and I was Rosie
Ellen
O'Donnell.
and
You
you
were
were
fabulous
Rosie.
Ellen.
And then Adele and Cher.
Adele and Cher. And then last year we were, 2 years ago, we were Laurel and Hardy. Last year we didn't get to do it. But so this year we're back and we're going to be doing it and should be interesting.
Should be fun.
We have locked in, I think, who we're going to be, and you won't want to miss this, you guys.
Right.
So that is next week. And then let me just say that the week after that, on Autism Live on Thursday, we're having Barry Present, who's going to be joining us, and on the 5th of November. And he is the author of the book Uniquely Human, you guys. We've had him on the show before when we were in locations, but we've never had him on the show. And on that same day, on November 5th at 4:00 in the afternoon, we're going to be hosting a town hall about conservatorship. We've got a wonderful lawyer who's going to be joining us to talk about conservatorship and what that is like for families. And Nancy, we'd love your input.
Yeah, I've got it coming up. We've got our court date coming up.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's a thing, and there are things that families need to know to be prepared. So we're doing a town hall and inviting people to it. That's Thursday the 5th. So, and then we've got a huge guest that we're locking down which day, but it's big doings that I can't wait to be able to disclose who it is that we're having on the show in November. It's just like I'm a flutter. So, all right, you guys. Nancy, thank you so much. We're a little bit over time, but love all of you. We'll be back on Monday. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me.
And yourselves a hug from me. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye for now.